Chapter 170. It had to be said that the ruined sky realm was indeed vast and boundless, as if it was a real world of its own. There were thousands of miles of barren land, endless primitive forests, mountains so tall that they pierced the clouds, and huge lakes between the mountains. All of this told the people who had broken into this place that this was a world of its own, a world that was independent of the 3 realms and 6 paths. However, this was not a paradise. Although there was a beautiful fairyland-like scenery, there was also an ominous place full of unknown dangers. In the ruined sky realm, the disappearance of the psychedelic stone forest alarmed many disciples of the 3 great Taoist sects who had entered the ruined sky realm. At dawn, 2 azure-robed Taoists and 3 or 4 white-robed youths appeared at the edge of this ominous place that had turned into a sea of sand. Even though the stone forest had disappeared and there was only a sea of sand in front of them, no one dared to casually enter this once ominous place. After all, this place had once devoured several of the most outstanding disciples of the 3 great Taoist sects. Although this had happened a long time ago, the people of the 3 great Taoist sects were still very afraid of this place, as it was classified as a great ominous place. Taoist Danchenzi, this? A slender, middle-aged Taoist in azure robes with a sword on his back looked at the sea of sand in front of him, and the look of extreme shock on his face could no longer be concealed. Seeing this scene in front of them, everyone was stunned. "Don't ask me, I don't know what happened here either," a Taoist with long black hair next to the Taoist with the sword on his back said in a deep voice as he looked at the sea of sand in front of him. He was also extremely shocked. These 2 azure-robed Taoists had sensed the abnormality of this place and rushed over from elsewhere. They were Danchenzi, an expert of the older generation of the Taishan sect, and Lu Rihai, an elder swordsman of the Guanqing celestial sect. There were as many as 81 spatial nodes that entered the ruined sky realm. Although the people of the 3 great Taoist sects had all gathered at the same place to enter the ruined sky realm, they had all been transported to different places. Very few people would enter the ruined sky realm through the same spatial node. Of course, it was not unheard of for 2 or 3 people to appear at the same spatial node. After Danchenzi and the others entered the ruined sky realm, they began to gather the disciples of their own sect. In the past 2 days, Danchenzi had found 2 disciples of the Taishan sect who had entered the ruined sky realm. The 2 white-robed youths standing behind Danchenzi were Dong Fangchen and Lei Ao of the 9 lineages of the Supreme Mystery sect. One of the 3 Guanqing celestial sect disciples standing behind Lu Rihai was Lu Yunhe. "Yes. It seems that the map of the ruined heaven realm will have to be redrawn," Lu Rihai muttered to himself. The original psychedelic stone forest had disappeared, and in its place was a boundless desert. This place had to be marked on the map. "Let's go." Danchenzi stared at the sea of sand in front of him, then suddenly turned to leave. 2 days had already passed of the 10-day deadline. Time was of the essence, and the sect leader's mission had to be completed. Danchenzi didn't want to waste time on unimportant things. Looking at the figure of Danchenzi leaving with the 2 disciples, Lu Rihai couldn't help but sneer. He could guess what Danchenzi was thinking. This was because the purpose of the 3 great Taoist sects entering the ruined sky realm this time was the same, which was to get the longevity grass. Otherwise, they would not have sent experts of the 9th heaven of the transcending mortality realm to lead the team into the ruined sky realm. It should be known that Danchenzi and the others were the strongest cultivators under the void-controlling realm in the 3 great Taoist sects, who were only 1 step away from the void-controlling realm. It was obvious how much importance the 3 great Taoist sects attached to this trip to the ruined sky realm. The 3 great Taoist sects all knew of the existence of the longevity grass, but everyone had a tacit understanding and didn't bring this matter to light. After all, the 3 great Taoist sects were of the same branch, and no one was willing to break the relationship between the 3 great Taoist sects for the longevity grass. But everyone wanted to get the longevity grass, which could increase their lifespan by 200 or 300 years. Therefore, in the ruined sky realm, the open and secret struggles of the 3 great Taoist sects were inevitable. This open and secret struggle was limited to the ruined sky realm, and the longevity grass would belong to whoever had the ability. All the grievances in the ruined sky realm would be written off the moment they walked out of the ruined sky realm. This was the position of the three great Taoist sects. "Let's go too," Lu Ruhai said and walked in another direction. Behind him, Lu Yunhe and the others exchanged a glance and hurriedly followed. After entering the ruined sky realm, the atmosphere between Dan Qinzi and Lu Ruhai had changed subtly. They were amiable on the surface, but not on the inside. Lu Yunhe and the others saw this, but they were shocked. They had a bad feeling. After Dan Qinzi and Lu Ruhai left with their respective people, this once dangerous place returned to silence. It was an absolute silence, a silence that made people's hearts palpitate. When the sun was high up in the sky, a man and a turtle appeared at the edge of an ancient battlefield. The two of them had been sneaking around in the woods next to the ancient battlefield for a long time. "Are we really going in?" the black-haired youth asked. "We're really going in." The turtle with the dragon's head and two forked dragon horns spoke in the human language. "Can't we not go in?" the youth asked. "No." The old turtle's attitude was very firm. "I don't want to take risks for that crappy saber." The youth seemed unwilling to enter the ancient battlefield in front of him, because it was simply too terrifying. As far as the eye could see, there were bones scattered on the ground everywhere. Endless bones stretched into the depths of the battlefield. Broken weapons and broken armors were silently telling the people of the tragedy of that great battle. Even after countless years, this battlefield was still filled with a towering murderous aura. A dark red mist lingered on the battlefield, as if the blood mist from back then had not dissipated. "What crappy saber? That's the fiercest saber in the ancient times." The old turtle couldn't help but stretch out his short turtle leg and kick the youth. "You 10,000-year-old tortoise, you want to fight again, don't you?" The youth rubbed his buttocks and pounced on the old turtle while yelling. "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" The old turtle did not show any weakness. He waved his two short turtle arms and continuously crossed his legs to dodge. At the same time, two turtle fists greeted the youth's face. "Your tortoise fists are useless." The youth laughed sinisterly and pounced on the old turtle. Thus, a shocking scene appeared. The man and the turtle rolled on the ground and began to wrestle. Unfortunately, these two fellows were incomparably strong. They crashed into trees, broke trees, and shattered rocks. In the blink of an eye, a part of the forest was turned upside down, and it was beyond recognition. The man and the turtle who fought in such an ungentlemanly manner were none other than Gu Fei and the old dragon turtle who had escaped from the ancient formation. In the end, Gu Fei used the mysterious shadowless kick and sent the old turtle flying. The old turtle smashed into a pile of weeds and finally ended this shocking battle. "If it weren't for the fact that my vitality was greatly injured." The old turtle crawled out of the weeds and angrily glared at Gu Fei. "You've said this many times." Gu Fei ignored old tortoise's glare and patted off the dust on his body as he spoke, unconcerned. "I'll ask you one last time. Are you going in or not?" The old turtle shook his bulky tortoise body, causing the dust on his body to rustle and fall. "One look and I can tell that this ancient battleground is an extremely dangerous place. I'm afraid it's even scarier than the stone forest formation. Why would you still want to go despite knowing that you're going to die? I'm not that stupid. Hee hee. You have a treasure to protect you. What's there to be afraid of? It's up to you whether you want to go or not. However, you'll have to find that annoying 9-colored herb yourself." Old Tortoise was very straightforward. Without waiting for Gu Fei to reply, he strode toward the ancient battlefield with his legs splayed out. "Ka-cha! Ka-cha!" As soon as the old turtle entered the ancient battleground, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. It was as if the ground was covered in white bones. The sound made Gu Fei's hair stand on end and his scalp go numb. "You sly old fox, you win!" Gu Fei had no choice but to chase after the old turtle. He knew that no one knew the ruined sky realm better than the old turtle. After all, the old turtle was from the same generation as the master of this realm. Although the old turtle had been trapped in the stone forest formation for countless years, he must know a lot of secrets. He really had to rely on this guide to find the 9-colored herb. "You really sense the aura of the primordial ominous saber?" Gu Fei caught up with the old turtle and asked in a deep voice. He was very displeased at the moment. The old turtle was clearly threatening him. Humph! I can't be wrong about the aura of the blue dragon saber. There's the dragon aura of the primordial ominous dragon on the saber. How can I not even recognize the dragon aura? The old turtle said confidently. Gu Fei shuddered at the thought of the primordial ominous dragon transformed from the saber soul of the primordial ominous saber. The true form of the primordial ominous saber wouldn't be a dragon, right? The old turtle did not answer Gu Fei's question. Instead, he slowed down. They had only entered less than 100 meters into the ancient battleground, but the old turtle seemed to have sensed something strange. What's wrong? The muscles all over Gu Fei's body immediately tightened. Fine strands of colorful light that were as thin as hair emerged on his skin. An obscure wave of power immediately seeped out from his body. The old turtle suddenly stopped. Its pair of turtle eyes flickered as it stared intently at a skeleton in front of it on the right. How is this possible? Is this the skeleton of a fallen immortal god? The old turtle muttered to himself. Gu Fei was shocked to hear this. An immortal god was a legendary existence. He quickly followed the old turtle's gaze and saw a complete skeleton half buried in a pile of bones not far in front of him on the right. However, this skeleton was different from the other skeletons. There was no trace of decay. Not only did it not decay, but it was also crystal clear as if it was carved from the finest sheep-fat white jade. There was also a faint layer of luster flowing on it. This is the skeleton of an immortal god, Gu Fei thought to himself. It was indeed extraordinary. The skeleton half buried in the pile of bones in front of him could be called a jade skeleton. Just when Gu Fei and Old Tortoise were bewildered, two emerald flames suddenly lit up in the two pitch-black eye sockets of the skeleton that was half buried in the dry bones. Chapter 171. On the ancient battlefield, the skull of a white skeleton that was half buried in the broken bones suddenly lit up with a green flame. A weak spiritual wave was emitted from the skull. Hiss! Gu Fei sucked in a breath of cold air at the sight of this, and all the hairs on his body stood on end. The old tortoise was not much weaker than Gu Fei, and its eyes almost fell to the ground. Oh, my tortoise! Has this guy come back to life? Old Tortoise exclaimed. Under the watchful eyes of a human and a tortoise, the white skeleton that was as translucent as jade climbed up from the broken bones. A demonic green light shot out from the two black eye sockets on the skull and swept toward Gu Fei and Old Tortoise. The green flame flickered, and the white skeleton seemed to be observing the two. It's not a dead thing, it seems to be. Gu Fei calmed down in an instant. Every nerve in his body was stretched taut, and the muscles and bones all over his body made a thunderous sound. As soon as the white skeleton showed any abnormalities, Gu Fei would attack and kill it immediately. Of course, Gu Fei did not have the confidence to destroy a skeleton that might have been left behind by an immortal. This guy has given birth to the fire of the soul, reversed life and death, and turned into an undead creature, Old Tortoise said in a deep voice. The ancient battlefield was really strange. Under the shroud of the blood-colored mist, it seemed that even the sun could not shine directly. The tragic aura and soaring murderous intent converged into gusts of bone-piercing chilly wind that blew toward Gu Fei and Old Tortoise. The two of them had only walked a few hundred feet into the ancient battlefield, but they felt as if they had walked into a hell. What should we do? Gu Fei stared at the sparkling white skeleton and said in a deep voice. His eyes did not leave the skeleton for even a second. Back on Yimeng Mountain, Gu Fei had seen ancestor White Bones controlling thousands of skeletons to attack the people of the Haotian trading group. However, the skeletons that ancestor White Bones controlled were just ordinary skeletons, while the white jade-like skeleton in front of him was different. It was a skeleton with a soul fire. In other words, it was very likely that this skeleton already had its own consciousness, and was not completely dead. It was an undead creature that had walked from death to life. What else can we do? Let's retreat slowly and see how this thing reacts. Old Tortoise whispered and began to retreat with light steps. Gu Fei and Old Tortoise were not afraid of the skeleton in front of them, but they were testing it. However, the moment they moved the skeleton in front of them on the right, swoosh! It disappeared from where it was and appeared in front of Gu Fei in the next moment, throwing a punch at Gu Fei. Without any warning, the white skeleton that had climbed out of the pile of bones suddenly attacked Gu Fei. Its sparkling jade-like fist erupted with a powerful energy wave. Pun! The bones around Gu Fei were immediately hit by the fist force that erupted from the white skeleton's fist and flew up, then swept behind Gu Fei. The white skeleton's fist force was as heavy as a mountain, making Gu Fei feel suffocated. It was as if the air around him had been sucked out in an instant. So fast! Although Gu Fei was shocked, as a martial artist, his body reacted faster than his mind in the face of danger. Whoosh! Without any hesitation, Gu Fei threw out a punch. A dazzling golden light radiated from his fist. That was the fist force of the golden element fist, which was extremely powerful. Boom! In an instant, Gu Fei's fist collided with the white skeleton's bone fist, bursting out with a dull bang. The terrifying fist force blasted out from the two fists. The bones on the ground around them were blown up by the impact of the terrifying force, and then instantly exploded into bone powder in the air, sweeping in all directions like a whirlwind. Both Gu Fei and the white skeleton retreated and punched each other. The two seemed to be evenly matched, but Gu Fei was in a hurry to fight, while the white skeleton was ready to attack. Even so, Gu Fei was secretly surprised that the skeleton's bones were really hard. Even his fist, which could shake ordinary magic weapons, could not break the skeleton's bone body. After retreating, the skeleton advanced and once again closed in on Gu Fei. The pale green soul flame in its eye sockets burst out. The eye sockets were a few feet long, and a strong wave of power rippled out from its jade-like bone body. It was hard to imagine that an undead creature could have such extraordinary combat strength. Just as the undead creature closed in on Gu Fei, a huge stone turtle shell suddenly appeared above the undead creature's head and smashed down on its head. The old turtle made its move, and it used its magic weapon, the stone turtle shell. Rumble! The huge stone tortoise shell was as big as a small mountain. It exuded an unparalleled power that shook the space around it. The soul flame in the white skeleton's head flickered rapidly, and a pair of fleshless fists directly smashed down on the stone turtle shell. Boom! Without any suspense, the huge stone turtle shell directly smashed the white jade-like skeleton into the ground, causing the ground to tremble violently. Gu Fei was aware of the power of the stone turtle shell. It could even withstand the terrifying saber aura of the primordial ominous saber, and could not be damaged by a magic weapon. It could be said to be a treasure that could smash anything. Although this white skeleton was extraordinary, and it was very likely that it was left behind by an immortal after his death, it was still unable to withstand the power of this turtle shell that could smash anything. After the stone turtle shell smashed the white skeleton into the ground, it quickly shrank and flew back into the old turtle's hand. Humph! A puny undead creature dares to show off in front of an old man like me? The old turtle was extremely proud of himself. He was very confident in his stone turtle shell. However, just when the old tortoise thought that it had killed the skeleton and was about to put away the stone tortoise shell in its hand, the skeleton rushed out of the ground with a pow! Both Gu Fei and the old turtle were taken aback. The jade-like white skeleton was covered with cracks, but it did not collapse. If you're not dead after that, then I'll reluctantly smash you again and let you die one more time, the old turtle said and took out the stone turtle shell out of nowhere. Although the crystal white skeleton was not smashed by old tortoise's shell, the spirit fire in the skull that was full of cracks had become very weak. Obviously, old tortoise's attack had severely injured the undead creature and put it in a dying state. If old tortoise were to hit it again, the undead creature would be dead for sure. However, just when the old turtle was about to take out the stone turtle shell to send the undead creature on its way, a sharp sound suddenly came from the depths of the ancient battlefield. Woo-woo! A sound that sounded like a ghost's howl echoed between heaven and earth. It made one's scalp tingle and the entire ancient battlefield shook. Then, among the thousands of bones, skeletons climbed out of the ground. They were not bones, nor were they ordinary skeletons, but crystal white skeletons. In a short while, dozens of skeletons similar to the original undead creature with soul flames in their skulls surrounded Gu Fei and the old turtle. Gu Fei and the old turtle could not help but change their expressions. This ancient battlefield was indeed a place of great danger. In the next moment, all the skeletons quickly pounced on Gu Fei and the old turtle with their white bony claws that emitted a faint light. They were definitely not ordinary bones. As the old turtle said, these skeletons were probably immortals when they were alive. This ancient battlefield was probably the battlefield of gods and demons. Otherwise, immortals and gods would not have fallen here. Boom! A 5-colored light burst out from Gu Fei's body, forming a 3 feet thick layer of earth energy around him. It was so thick that it looked like it had materialized. All the skeletons that were charging at him were blown away by the earth energy. Gu Fei continuously punched out, and the surging power blasted all the incoming skeletons away. However, it could not break the bones that were harder than fine iron. After the blasted skeletons got up from the ground, they pounced on Gu Fei again. There was no end to their attacks, which put Gu Fei in a predicament of being besieged. On the other hand, the old turtle was much more relaxed. He yelled and waved the stone turtle shell at the surrounding skeletons. This old turtle was also going all out. Wherever the stone turtle shell passed, broken bones would fly out and shatter. 6 or 7 skeletons were smashed into pieces and 6 or 7 balls of soul flames were extinguished by him. "Kid, when are you going to use that sword of yours?" The old turtle could not help but feel annoyed when he saw that Gu Fei was fighting a dozen or so skeletons that were besieging him with only his fists. To the old turtle, Gu Fei was simply a big idiot for not using the magic weapon but using his fists to fight against the undead creatures. Woo-woo! The scalp-numbing ghost howl sounded again. This time, the fluctuations in the ancient battlefield were even more intense. In the depths of the ancient battlefield, monstrous blood-colored clouds and mist had surged, and the strange sound of tens of thousands of galloping horses came from the depths of the ancient battlefield. From afar, it seemed as if the gates of the bloody hell had opened and an army of undead creatures had arrived in this world. Countless white skeletons rushed out of the crimson clouds in the depths of the battlefield. Huge shadows could be vaguely seen in the clouds. Then, huge bone dragons broke through the crimson clouds and rushed out. They flapped their wings that had turned into white bones and flew in the direction of Gu Fei and Old Tortoise. This was an army of undead creatures. Gu Fei and the old turtle were completely shocked. They never imagined that there were so many undead creatures in the depths of the ancient battlefield. The blood-colored clouds surged and the army of white skeletons surged forward. Their murderous intent soared to the sky, and the vast and mighty aura made the world lose its color. Chapter 172. Without any hesitation, Gu Fei and the old tortoise turned around and rushed out of the ancient battlefield. Gu Fei guided the spirit chi of the god weapon out of his body and condensed it into an ancient sword in his hand. This was not the sword soul, but the spirit chi of the god weapon. When the sword soul broke through the stone forest formation, it absorbed a large amount of chi of heaven and earth and gradually fell asleep. The spirit chi nurtured the spiritual soul, and the sword soul slept in the spirit chi of the god weapon to recuperate. After all, it was only a broken spirit weapon. Back then, someone used a supreme magical power to split the spirit weapon, causing the spirit weapon to suffer unimaginable damage. It was unknown how long it would take for it to recover completely. Of course, these were not things that Gu Fei could think about now. Right now, he could not wait to grow a pair of wings and fly out of this evil ancient battlefield. Chi! 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 Gu Fei waved the long sword in his hand and slashed out streaks of rainbow-like sword chi. As if he was chopping melons and vegetables, he chopped 7 or 8 skeletons that were blocking his way into 2 and fiercely rushed out of the encirclement. Those were the immortal god's skeletal bodies, but under the attack of the god weapon, even the immortal god's skeletal bodies could not withstand the sharpness of the god weapon. The ancient Pegasus rushed out of the encirclement and used the 8 desolate steps, pushing his speed to the limit. His body seemed to have transformed into a phantom, leaving behind a series of afterimages in the void. In an instant he had rushed to the edge of the ancient battlefield. With his full speed, he could cross the distance of 100 feet in the blink of an eye. However, just as Gu Fei was about to rush out of the ancient battlefield, a white figure rushed out from the side and blocked his way. Gu Fei couldn't help but be startled, but it was very difficult for him to stop in an instant as he was running at top speed. In that instant, Gu Fei was also startled as he clearly saw the figure. To be exact, it was the silhouette of a skeleton. The one who stopped Gu Fei was the white skeleton whose body was full of cracks, and whose soul fire was extremely dim after being smashed by the old tortoise. Reckless fool! Gu Fei didn't stop. Furthermore, he couldn't stop anyway. He swung his sword, unleashing an unparalleled sword chi towards the skeleton. Chi! Wherever the sword chi passed, a skull covered in cracks flew up like a cracked porcelain. Then, the headless skeleton was directly hit by Gu Fei. Pun! With a sound, broken bones flew everywhere, shattered bones splattered everywhere. That already cracked immortal god skeleton was smashed into pieces by Gu Fei, the sparkling and translucent bone body, shattered into millions of pieces. Gu Fei did not stop and swung his sword. Chi! With a soft sound, the skull was split into two. The soul fire in the skull was also instantly destroyed by the sword chi. No undead creature could stop Gu Fei. Gu Fei rushed into the forest beside the ancient battlefield. At this time, he could no longer care about the old tortoise. F***ck. This brat has no sense of loyalty, the old tortoise roared. At this moment, he displayed a very brave and ferocious scene. He swung a huge stone tortoise shell and smashed it in all directions. Dozens of skeletons besieging the old tortoise were either smashed into pieces, their soul fires destroyed, or sent flying. It was a complete mess. At this time, the ground shook violently. The vast army of skeletons rushed out from the depths of the ancient battlefield like a torrent, stirring up a boundless mist of blood. The huge bone dragon in the sky was about to reach them. Oh my mother tortoise! Seeing this scene, the old tortoise immediately jumped up from the ground and waved the stone tortoise shell, rushing out like a madman. It was truly a case of killing gods, Buddhas, and demons. The undead creatures that besieged the old tortoise were immediately scattered by the crazed old tortoise. The old tortoise also rushed into the dense forest outside the ancient battlefield as if his butt was on fire. The army of skeletons was unstoppable. They chased the two for more than 10 miles before retreating like a tide. It seemed that the undead creatures could not go far from the ancient battlefield. Even so, they chased Gu Fei and the old tortoise until they wet their pants in terror, and were in a sorry state. There were several powerful undead creatures in the army of skeletons. Fortunately, they could not go far from the ancient battlefield. Otherwise, Gu Fei and the old tortoise would have no way out under the endless pursuit of the army of skeletons. The man and the tortoise fled into a small valley in a panic. Here, water gurgled, birds sang, and flowers bloomed. It was countless times better than the ancient battlefield that was filled with killing intent that shot into the sky. Gu Fei and the old tortoise found a clean grassland by the stream flowing through the deep valley and sat down. Their faces were still pale and they were still in a state of shock. You damn old tortoise, I was almost killed by you! Gu Fei was really depressed after being chased by the army of skeletons. Do you think I want to be chased? The old tortoise rolled on the grassland and stared at Gu Fei angrily. However, it's strange that the strength of the few undead creatures leading the army seems to have far surpassed the limits of this false realm. Hearing the old tortoise's words, Gu Fei could not help but frown. Recalling the scene of being chased just now, he seemed to have really sensed a few incomparably powerful auras. The cultivation of those who entered the void heaven realm was suppressed to the self-awakening realm. No one was an exception. Even this antique dragon tortoise, who had lived for countless years, was also suppressed by this world. But why were the few undead creatures leading the army on the ancient battlefield not subject to this restriction? This was a very serious problem. No wonder the three great Taoist sects would send a group of young disciples into the void heaven realm every 120 years, when the Devil's Star was charging into the seventh slaughter realm and demons were wreaking havoc in the world. The higher-ups of the three great Taoist sects must have known that there were powerful creatures in the void heaven realm, which was why they were unwilling to set foot in the void heaven realm. Just imagine, outside the ruin heaven realm, if a void-controlling cultivator's cultivation base was suppressed to the self-awakening state after entering the ruin heaven realm, if he encountered a powerful creature in the ruin heaven realm and couldn't exert his powerful cultivation base, wouldn't that cultivator die in vain? Gu Fei vaguely seemed to understand something. There was a reason why the great cultivators of the three great Taoist sects did not enter the void heaven realm in person. The old tortoise pondered for a long time before finally coming to this conclusion. The creatures born in this false realm may not be suppressed. It seemed that this was the only way to explain why the power of those undead creatures could break through the limits of this world and be unrestrained. After learning about this, both Gu Fei and the old tortoise couldn't help but be cautious. After all, no one knew if they would encounter another powerful creature born in this false realm on their way. From the old tortoise, Gu Fei learned that this false realm was actually evolving into a real macro world. In other words, during the course of thousands of years of evolution, this world had also been giving birth to all kinds of species. They were completely different from the species in the outside macro world. The species here abided by the laws of heaven and earth, and the powerful creatures that grew up in accordance with the laws of heaven and earth naturally wouldn't be suppressed by the power of heaven and earth in the void heaven realm. Only outsiders, or invaders, would be firmly suppressed by the laws of heaven and earth set by the supreme expert who created this world. Whether it was the lofty immortals or ordinary cultivators, as long as their cultivation base broke through the self-awakening realm, their cultivation base would be mercilessly suppressed by this world. Unless the person who entered the void heaven realm had a terrifying cultivation base that defied heaven and earth, he would be able to ignore the laws of heaven and earth set by the owner of this world. The small valley was lush and full of vitality. Many fruit trees grew next to the stream, and the branches of the fruit trees were full of attractive fruits. After trying to eat a few of the fruits, Gu Fei and the old tortoise found that their mouths were full of saliva, and the flesh of the fruits melted in their mouths. It was extraordinarily delicious. After making sure that there was no discomfort after eating the fruits, the man and the tortoise let out their stomachs and enjoyed a feast of fresh fruits. The old tortoise even directly transplanted a dozen fruit trees next to the stream into its false realm. After resting, the man and the tortoise discussed their journey again. There was no hope of obtaining the primordial ominous saber, and Gu Fei was unwilling to enter the primordial battlefield again. The old tortoise also had a lingering fear, so he had to wait until his cultivation base was restored before entering the depths of the primordial battlefield to retrieve the broken primordial ominous saber. Even if such a precious divine weapon was broken and only a remnant soul was left, it was still a supreme weapon. Not to mention the old tortoise, even Gu Fei was envious of it. However, given their current cultivation base, their lives would be in danger even if they set foot on the primordial battlefield, let alone the depths of the primordial battlefield. Even if they were reluctant, they could only give up. After all, everything was possible only if they could preserve their lives. If they lost their lives, everything would be for naught. The map on Gu Fei's jade slip indicated that the 9-colored immortal herb grew in a place called Sky Burial Valley. Of course, the name Sky Burial Valley was later given by the people of the three great Taoist sects. While Gu Fei and the old tortoise were studying the map, a small incident happened. When Gu Fei opened the Dharma treasure pouch, a 7-foot-long green snake darted out and almost bit the old tortoise beside Gu Fei. Not only was Gu Fei dumbfounded, but the old tortoise was also extremely surprised. Gu Fei was dumbfounded because the Shaoqing snake was originally only the size of a chopstick, but now. The old tortoise was surprised because there were 2 obvious bulges on the top of the green snake's head. Those were obviously 2 horns that were gradually growing. It seemed that the green snake was transforming into a flood dragon. "Where did you catch this little thing?" asked the old tortoise. The green snake coiled around Gu Fei and raised its head high. It flicked its tongue at the old tortoise vigilantly. It was obvious that it was hostile toward the old tortoise. I didn't catch it, replied Gufei. Seeing that the old tortoise seemed to be very interested in the green snake, Gufei told the old tortoise about how he encountered the green snake. Hee, how about handing this little thing over to me? After listening, the old tortoise actually had ideas about the green snake. What are you up to this time, old antique? Gufei immediately became vigilant. Could it be that the old tortoise knew about the green snake's origin? From a snake's body to a flood dragon, this little thing has unlimited potential. If I grow old, maybe it can really turn into a flood dragon. How about it? It's up to you whether you want to hand this little thing over to me, said the old tortoise casually. It did not seem to care that much. The old tortoise's attitude changed so quickly that Gufei did not know which of its words were true and which were false. He felt that he was being fooled by the old tortoise. In the end, Gufei also hoped that the green snake could turn into a flood dragon, so he decided to hand the green snake over to the old tortoise. The old tortoise was very straightforward. It directly opened the pseudo-heaven and earth and kept the green snake inside. Then, the two walked out of the small valley and headed east. According to the map, Sky Burial Valley was in the east of the known area. Chapter 173. Old Tortoise, do you know the way or not? If you don't, tell me now. A man and a tortoise were traversing through a dense forest. One of the white-clothed youths impatiently asked the old tortoise with the dragon head beside him. Humph! If you don't believe me, you can go find that Sky Burial Valley yourself. Obviously, the young man in white's suspicion of the old tortoise made him very unhappy. At this moment, the old tortoise was playing with a green snake that was 7 or 8 feet long. This green snake was different from ordinary green snakes. It was covered with green scales that glittered like emeralds, as if there was a layer of flowing light. There were 2 protrusions on the snake's head that looked like 2 horns. This green snake was the Shaoqing snake that Gufei encountered in the southern wilderness. The Shaoqing snake could be considered to have saved Gufei's life and helped Gufei suck out the extremely poisonous toxins in his body. The green snake seemed to have a mysterious origin. It could devour beast crystals and demonic beast cores. It was because it had devoured the beast crystals of the magical ape and the mysterious snake core that Gufei obtained from the black water mystical viper that he killed in the mysterious cave at the bottom of the icy azure pool. As a result, the Shaoqing snake, which was the size of a chopstick, had grown into a big snake that was 7 or 8 feet long. You old tortoise, didn't you say that you wanted the Shaoqing to transform into a dragon? I think you're treating the Shaoqing as your pet. Gufei glanced at the green snake that was coiled around the old tortoise's body, and said disdainfully. The green snake had become extremely docile in the old tortoise's hand. It was no wonder that it was so obedient. After being tortured by the old tortoise for a few hours, even if it was not obedient, it would still be obedient. It's not common for a green snake to transform into a dragon. I have my reasons for doing so. It has nothing to do with you, the old tortoise said calmly as he stroked the 2 protrusions on the Shaoqing snake's head that could barely be called horns. Hey, old tortoise, let me ask you, when can we get out of this forest? Gufei kept brandishing the divine weapon's essence chi. All the thorns, weeds, and vines in his way were shattered by Gufei's sword. Every time he encountered a place where the thorns and vines were too dense, Gufei would directly punch out, blasting the weeds, thorns, and old vines that were blocking the way into dregs, and then he continued to move forward. The speed at which a man and a tortoise traversed the dense forest was not slow at all. Yes, I'm almost there. When that pervert brought me into this pseudo-realm, I used my divine sense to search this world. If this world is still the same as before and hasn't changed much, it seems that we still have to pass through a city after passing through this dense forest. Then, we can reach Heaven Burial Valley. After saying that, the old turtle continued to play with the green snake. Instead of saying that it was a snake, it was more appropriate to say that it was playing with it. Isn't the ruined Heaven realm a wasteland? How can there be a city? Upon hearing this, Gu Fei asked in surprise, "Could it be that humans have been bred in this pseudo-realm? Give birth to your head." The old turtle rolled its eyes at Gu Fei. "Do you think that pervert is the legendary god of creation who can create everything at will and even give birth to humans? Then why did the master of this pseudo-realm build a city in his own pseudo-realm?" Gu Fei was even more curious. The old turtle said grumpily, "How would I know? That pervert probably didn't want to be left out, so he detained a group of people from the outside world and brought them into his pseudo-realm. Yes, that should be the case. That pervert seems to be a pervert, so he built a huge harem in his pseudo-realm. Yes, that's right. That pervert is really despicable, shameless, obscene, and hateful. Beauties, beauties, a city full of beauties. How many beauties in the 3 realms and 6 paths have been defiled by that pervert? That pervert should really go to hell." The old turtle gritted its teeth and pretended to be indignant. However, Gu Fei clearly saw that the old turtle's eyes were getting brighter and brighter as it spoke. The more it spoke, the more excited it became. Towards the end, its eyes were even shining, and the saliva at the corner of its mouth was almost dripping to the ground. This old turtle isn't a good turtle either. Gu Fei could not help but despise the old turtle from the bottom of his heart. 1 man and 1 tortoise, laughing and cursing, traversed the dangerous ancient forest. In the afternoon, they finally walked out of this ancient forest. Perhaps it was because of the old turtle's aura, but Gu Fei and the others did not encounter a single ferocious beast as they walked through the ancient forest. Even snakes, insects, rats, and ants were rarely seen. It was unclear if Gu Fei and the others were lucky or if there were really no ferocious beasts in the ancient forest. However, according to Gu Fei's experience of living in the forest, it would seem abnormal if there was not even a single ferocious beast in such an ancient forest. After coming out of the ancient forest, Gu Fei and the old turtle climbed a hill and looked east. Sure enough, a huge black shadow was crouching at the end of the world like a prehistoric giant beast. "There's really a city!" Gu Fei exclaimed. "Humph! Do you think I'm lying to you?" the old turtle said unhappily. As it spoke, it took off Shaoqing from its body and stuffed it into the stone turtle shell. The old turtle had melted its pseudo-world into the stone turtle shell. It did this because it was afraid that its inner world would collapse due to the great reduction of its cultivation base. Therefore, although the old turtle could still control its pseudo-world, it had lost the qualification to evolve into a real world. The toughness of the stone tortoise shell was not inferior to a treasure-grade magic weapon. It was hard to destroy it. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for the 18 stone tower fighting souls to break the pseudo-heaven and earth at the same time, and not be destroyed by the 18 fighting souls. "Let's go!" After the old turtle stuffed Shaoqing into the pseudo-world, it rushed down the hill. The old turtle had already learned from Gu Fei that the people outside could open the ruined sky realm once every 260 years and that the passageway in and out of the ruined sky realm could only last for 10 days. Now that 3 days had passed, it meant that in 7 days, the passageway in and out of the ruined sky realm would be closed again, and it would be opened again after 260 years. Since they had escaped from the formation of the stone forest, why would the old turtle be willing to wait for another 260 years? He couldn't wait to leave this pseudo-world. The old turtle wanted to get out of the pseudo-world even more than Gu Fei. Therefore, he was more anxious than Gu Fei to pick the 9-colored grass and get out of this damn place. Of course, if there was enough time, the old turtle had another crazy idea to put into action. Although the probability of success was almost 0, the old turtle would still try if there was a chance. After descending the hill, there was no road ahead. Although there were some tall trees that dotted the boundless wilderness, the field of view was much wider than in the primitive forest. Apart from weeds, rocks, vines, low thorns, and shrubs, there seemed to be nothing else in the flat plains. Gu Fei and the old turtle moved quickly, crossing the withered weeds, the dry river, and the thorns all over the ground, heading straight for the giant city on the horizon. Wherever they passed, the old turtle kept wailing and howling. The originally calm field began to boil, which also confirmed Gu Fei's previous suspicions. Countless ferocious beasts were lurking in the endless field. The startled beasts fled in disorder. In addition to the commonly seen lions, tigers, and elephants, there were also many ferocious mutants. There were groups of flying centipedes, unicorn-horned snakes, and divine wolves the size of giant elephants. Some of them flew fast, some ran like the wind, and some roared like thunder. Without exception, all of them were running wildly into the distance. Gu Fei was incomparably shocked. This old tortoise was simply a super monstrous monster. All the ferocious beasts seemed to be afraid of him. Wherever this old monster passed by, the beasts would scramble to avoid him as if he was the plague. No wonder he did not see a single ferocious beast when he passed through the primitive forest. It seemed that the ferocious beasts entrenched in the forest had all avoided the old monster's aura from a distance. Despite the peaceful appearance of the wilderness, there were so many ferocious beasts lurking around. If it weren't for the old tortoise's ability to intimidate the beasts, it would have been difficult for Gu Fei to pass through the wilderness. When night fell, the man and the turtle finally arrived at a small hill outside the giant city after a long and arduous journey. It was only when they got closer that they realized how huge the city was. Gu Fei only felt an infinitely ancient aura hit him in the face. The pitch-black city walls were at least 300 feet high, and the ends could not be seen on either side. Looking past the city walls, there seemed to be nothing. Vaguely, there seemed to be a layer of gray fog lingering in the city. The city was lifeless, and the giant city gave off a strong sense of oppression. This made Gu Fei and the old turtle feel that something was wrong. Moreover, Gu Fei and the old turtle realized that the giant city seemed to have suffered serious damage. The tall city towers had already collapsed, and the city walls were riddled with holes, as if they had been attacked from the outside. Some parts of the city walls had even completely collapsed, revealing huge gaps. Broken bricks and tiles were scattered all over the ground. The city gate was still intact, but the city gate had disappeared. The pitch-black city gate was like a devil's lair that could devour people at any time, and it gave off a heart-palpitating aura. After experiencing the near-death experience of being chased by the endless undead creatures on the ancient battlefield, Gu Fei and the old turtle had to be cautious. On the hill, the man and the turtle looked at each other without saying a word. However, they had a tacit understanding at this moment. They did not want to enter the dilapidated ancient city. However, if they were to take a detour, it would take a lot of time. However, it would definitely be much safer than entering this dilapidated city. Safety first. Needless to say. Therefore, Gu Fei and the old turtle decided to take a detour around the giant city, preferring to spend more time. However, just as the man and the tortoise were about to descend from the hillside, a ray of light suddenly shot out from the huge city. It broke through the gray mist above the huge city and soared into the sky. Then, with a bang, it exploded in the air, illuminating the entire sky with a snow-white light. The man and the tortoise were startled by this sudden turn of events, and they immediately stopped in their tracks to look at the sky. "What a beautiful firework!" Old Tortoise exclaimed as he looked at the large ball of colorful firework that exploded in the sky above the giant city. "That's not fireworks!" Gu Fei looked at the colorful brilliance that was gradually extinguishing in the sky, and his surprised expression gradually became solemn. "That's a distress signal!" Someone had entered the ancient city, encountered danger, and sent out a distress signal. Chapter 174. Although the majestic city was dilapidated, its ancient aura still shocked Gu Fei. There was no doubt that this was an ancient city that had stood on this land for countless years. Under the hazy night, the ancient city was lifeless. There was no light, no vitality, and no trace of people. It was like a dead city. This made Gu Fei and the old tortoise very afraid. However, just as Gu Fei and the old tortoise were planning to bypass the ancient city, a beam of light suddenly shot out from the ancient city, and then a ball of colorful light exploded in the sky above the ancient city. The gorgeous light broke through the gray smoke above the ancient city and illuminated the sky in an instant. Such a strong light could be clearly seen even from hundreds of kilometers away. Under the illumination of the colorful light, Gu Fei could vaguely make out some hazy scenes in the city. The streets were dilapidated, the houses had collapsed, and the pavilions were half destroyed. It was as if this ancient city had been abandoned for countless years. Swoosh! Gu Fei directly rushed down the hillside, leaving an afterimage on the spot, and ran like the wind and lightning toward the dark city gate that had opened up. The colorful light that shot into the sky from the ancient city was a distress signal sent by a low-level disciple of the Supreme Mystery Sect to the nearby fellow disciples when they were in danger. After all, the fire talisman message transmission technique of low-level disciples could not be transmitted more than 100 kilometers because of the limitations of their cultivation realm, but the colorful flames could be clearly seen by their fellow disciples within 100 kilometers. Therefore, when entering the ruined sky realm, Gu Fei and the others carried this kind of signal flame that could emit strong light with them in case of emergency. Gu Fei could not turn a blind eye to his fellow disciples in danger. Gu Fei practiced martial arts and walked the path of martial arts, which emphasized freedom and freedom. Wherever his heart went, he would put it into action without any restraints. Without any hesitation, Gu Fei rushed toward the ancient city full of unknown dangers. "Brat, come back quickly!" When the old tortoise saw Gu Fei rushing down the hill, it anxiously stomped its feet. There was definitely an unknown danger in this dilapidated ancient city. No one knew what would happen if they rashly entered. From Old Tortoise's point of view, putting oneself in danger for a stranger was the stupidest thing to do, unless one wanted to be a hero. Of course, Old Tortoise did not want to be a hero. It was not easy to be a hero. It was very likely that he would fail to be a hero in the end and lose his life instead. Gu Fei turned a deaf ear to Old Tortoise's shouts. His body swayed a few times and he rushed into the city gate. The hillside outside the city was not far from the city gate. F***CK. Why am I so unlucky? Old Tortoise saw Gu Fei's figure disappear into the pitch-black city gate. Although he was extremely reluctant, he still rushed down the hill and chased after Gu Fei. Old Tortoise's current cultivation base was less than 1/10,000th of his peak, and his cultivation base was suppressed to the self-awakening state by the power of heaven and earth here. If he wanted to leave the ruined sky realm, he would have to rely on Gu Fei's help. If Gu Fei was lost in the ancient city, it would be tantamount to cutting off Old Tortoise's way out. Old Tortoise did not want to be trapped in this world forever, which was something he absolutely did not want to see. Therefore, he could only follow Gu Fei and rush into the ancient city. The colorful light above the ancient city had gradually dissipated, and the gray mist that resembled the aura of death had once again shrouded the entire enormous ancient city. On a rocky hill that was only a few hundred feet tall, about 20 to 30 miles away from the ancient city, a Taoist with a sword on his back and a handsome appearance was coldly looking at the colorful light above the ancient city that was about to completely disappear. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. He was a slender middle-aged Taoist dressed in a green Taoist robe. Behind him stood 5 white-robed youths who were also carrying swords on their backs. In the world of Tao, only the Guanxing immortal sect was known as the Orthodox Sword Tao. There was only one sword and all kinds of divine abilities. With a sword in hand, one could break through all kinds of divine arts, and even gods and demons would have to flee. The Taoist with a sword on his back on the rocky hill was Lu Ruhai of the Guanxing immortal sect. The 5 white-robed youths with small swords embroidered on their sleeves behind him were 5 of the 10 disciples who had entered the ruined sky realm. Among the 5 disciples, the 2 leading them were the eldest senior brother Ren Wuming and Lu Yunhe of the Guanxing immortal sect's younger generation. In the ruined sky realm, Lu Ruhai's cultivation base was also confined to the 9th heavenly layer of awakening, and the power of the 9th heavenly layer of transcending mortality was firmly confined in his body. As soon as he used the power of the transcending mortality realm, the power of the world in the ruined sky realm would immediately gather from all directions and obliterate the power that disregarded the laws of the world in the ruined sky realm. This put Lu Ruhai in great danger. If he had not immediately dispersed the power of the transcending mortality realm, he might have been obliterated by the power of the world and completely disappeared from the world. Even the light-bound flying sword that had merged with the sword origin in his body was forced out of his body by the power of the world in the ruined sky realm, unable to fuse with the sword origin in his body again. Lu Ruhai had no choice but to carry the sword on his back. Renwuming stepped forward and respectfully said to Lu Ruhai, "Uncle Master, the fireworks coming from the ancient city ahead seem to be a distress signal from the Taishan sect. Should we go and help them?" "Go and help them? Why should we go and help them?" Lu Ruhai slowly turned around and looked at Renwuming. His eyes were like two divine swords that shone on Renwuming's body. To be a cultivator, one had to sever all emotions and desires, and focus on comprehending the immortal way. The life and death of others did not matter. Under Lu Ruhai's extremely sharp gaze, Renwuming felt the sword origin in his body tremble, and his whole body suddenly felt as if it had fallen into an ice cave. A chill ran up his spine, and all the pores on his body stood on end. Lu Ruhai intentionally or unintentionally revealed the power of a superior sword cultivator, which not only made Renwuming's heart palpitate, but also the expressions of the other four youths changed. But judging from the marks left by Junior Sister Li and the others, Junior Sister Li and the other junior brothers seemed to be with the people of the Taishan sect. Renwuming hesitated for a moment. Although he was frightened under Lu Ruhai's gaze, he still said this in the end. "Ah." Lu Ruhai sighed, and his gaze that was sharp like the edge of a sword started to become gentle. "It's not that I'm refusing to lend a hand, but there's really an extremely great danger within this enormous ancient city. If even we fall into it, then who would complete the assignment the sect master and founding ancestor gave us?" Lu Ruhai had a helpless expression. This? Renwuming, Lu Yunhe, and the other four disciples couldn't help but look at each other. For a moment, they didn't know what to say. Everyone was silent. Lu Ruhai glanced at the 5 disciples in front of him, then said in a low voice, "Go around the ancient city and continue to Heaven Burial Valley. After obtaining the 9-colored immortal herb, we will come back to save them." Lu Ruhai made such a decision. In the eyes of Renwuming and the other 4 disciples, this martial uncle was inevitably a bit cold and heartless. However, Lu Ruhai had given them the task of being the sect master, so they couldn't say anything. They could only pray that their fellow sect members who were lost in the ancient city would be able to escape. The people of the Guanqing Immortal Sect, under Lu Ruhai's lead, went around the city. In another direction, the disciples of the Shangqing sect, led by Ding Yangzi, also saw the distress signal from the ancient city. Ding Yangzi also made the same decision as Lu Ruhai. They went around the city and did not want to help. In the face of profit, all the talk about solidarity and interdependence seemed to be bullshit. It was as if Lu Ruhai, Ding Yangzi, and the others had tossed all of this to the back of their minds. Even if their fellow sect members were lost in the ancient city, they didn't think of a way to save them, leaving them to fend for themselves. This was the cruelty of the cultivation world. It could also be said that this was an expression of the cold and heartless side of human nature. If the people of the Taishan sect who were lost in the ancient city knew of the actions of the Guanqing Immortal Sect and the Shangqing sect, there would definitely be a gap between the two sides. If the disciples of the Guanqing Immortal Sect who were lost in the ancient city knew of Lu Ruhai's ruthlessness, they would also be bitterly disappointed. The people who were lost in the ancient city were completely cut off from help. No one would care about their life or death, and no one would extend a helping hand. Of course, Gu Fei was an exception, and the old tortoise could barely be considered half an exception. The moment he rushed into the ancient city, Gu Fei felt a gust of cold wind hit him in the face. He looked up and saw that the sky was gray, as if it was wrapped in a layer of death. The dark street was empty and quiet. On both sides of the street, there were dilapidated houses. The cold wind blew over, and from time to time, the creaking sounds of broken doors and windows being blown by the wind could be heard. In the corner of the wall, the wind picked up a few wisps of smoke and dust, which circled a few times before dissipating. The deathly silence made Gu Fei feel a great pressure. His footsteps slowed down. The ancient city was full of vicissitudes. He carefully walked along the ancient street. At this moment, the old tortoise also rushed into the ancient city reluctantly. It came to Gu Fei's side and looked around. "This damn place. The old tortoise was extremely solemn. It was no longer its usual joking and scolding self. They walked along the street for a few miles. Apart from the cold wind that blew from time to time, there was nothing unusual in the city. Where were those people lost? After walking along the ancient street for about 7 to 8 miles, they still could not see the end of the street. It was enough to show how huge the ancient city was. However, Gu Fei and the old tortoise gradually became uneasy. The old tortoise had taken out its stone turtle shell, which could smash heaven and earth but would never hit itself, and held it tightly in its hand. Meanwhile, Gu Fei guided the spirit chi of the heavenly weapon out of his body and condensed an ancient sword shadow on his right hand. What made Gu Fei and the old tortoise feel like they were facing a formidable enemy? This was because Gu Fei and the old tortoise saw white bones that were as clear as jade scattered on the ground on the street. These white bones were no different from the immortal god skeletons that they had seen in the ancient battlefield. They were all as clear as fine jade. The appearance of such white bones on the street made Gu Fei and the old tortoise extremely nervous. After all, they were not ordinary bones, but immortal god skeletons. In other words, a large number of immortals had fallen in the ancient city, which was why so many immortal god skeletons were left behind. However, none of the immortal god skeletons scattered on the street were complete. Upon seeing this, Gu Fei and the old tortoise were slightly relieved. If they were not complete immortal god skeletons, they did not have to worry about them suddenly hurting people. In the ancient battlefield, there were undead creatures that were not completely dead. No one knew if those undead creatures would also appear in the ancient city. Clang! Clang, clang! Buzz! All of a sudden, the sound of metal clashing and swords humming could be heard from the depths of the ancient street. Then, Gu Fei and the old tortoise sensed the fluctuation of mana and sword chi coming from the front. It's in front! Gu Fei and the old tortoise immediately became spirited and quickly rushed in the direction of the sound. Pun! 5 colored rays of light burst out from Gu Fei's body, forming a layer of chi aura outside his body. The powerful fluctuation of yuan chi blocked the chilly wind that was sweeping towards him. When they got closer, Gu Fei found that there were more than 10 people in white fighting fiercely with a group of people in ragged clothes who seemed to be soldiers with spears in their hands. This? Gu Fei was shocked. The group of people wielding ancient spears were real soldiers who had fought on the battlefield. The tattered clothes on their bodies were not clothes, but broken armors. Every soldier was 9 feet tall, and they stood proudly like moving mountains. As they waved the rusty ancient spears in their hands, they actually had an indomitable and powerful aura. There is no fluctuation of life. They are a group of lifeless walking corpses, the old tortoise said in surprise. He was also stunned by the scene in front of him. Their eyes were gray and lifeless, and their skin that was exposed to the air was deathly white. This group of soldiers were simply corpse soldiers that had crawled out of their graves. In the ancient city, there was a force controlling these corpse soldiers. This group of corpse soldiers that had obviously died for countless years were extremely powerful. When they waved the ancient spears in their hands, they seemed to be able to emit a terrifying power, forcing the more than 10 people in white to retreat. Many people's clothes were already stained with blood. Ancient and broken armor, rusty ancient spears. This group of corpse soldiers might be the corpse soldiers that guarded the ancient city, but for some reason, they had turned into walking corpses. Even though they had been dead for countless years, these corpse soldiers still faithfully guarded the ancient city, expelling outsiders who dared to set foot in the ancient city. 5 dazzling sword lights fiercely collided with the ancient spears in the hands of the corpse soldiers. The white flying swords also could not shake the ancient spears, and were either directly knocked away or swept away by the ancient spears. Among the people surrounded by the corpse soldiers, Gu Fei found Danchunzi, Li Lingfeng, Ziyu, Dong Fangchen, Liao, Qin Daoyun, Song Ruochen, and Xiao Wushang, 8 people from his own sect. Xinqiru and Guobufan were not among them. As for the other 5, Gu Fei only recognized them as disciples of the Guanqing celestial sect. One of them was a beautiful girl with long hair and flying sword lights. She was Li Mengyao, the junior sister of Guanqing. magical treasures and flying swords bombarded the bodies of these ancient corpse soldiers, but they did not even leave a mark. These corpse soldiers seemed to have indestructible bodies that were difficult to destroy and indelible. This made everyone's heart cold. These ancient corpse soldiers were simply invincible. The experts of the Taishan sect and the Guanqing celestial sect were already in danger. Moreover, there were faint sounds of heavy footsteps coming from all directions. It seemed that there were countless terrifying corpse soldiers coming this way. Chapter 175. The ancient city was definitely a place of great danger. At this moment, no one doubted that there was an unfathomable force in the ancient city that was driving the corpse soldiers that had been dead for countless years to attack the intruders. Dozens of corpse soldiers were wearing broken armor and holding ancient spears. Their bodies were not corroded, and when they waved the ancient spears, they did not seem to have any magical power. However, they were able to fight against the experts of the Taishan sect and the Shangqing sect, which was really shocking. Even if immortals died in the ancient city, their bodies would turn into dust, leaving only white bones. No one knew what kind of power kept the bodies of the corpse soldiers from the ancient city from rotting. Every corpse soldier walked with heavy steps, like a moving mountain, pressing toward Dan Chenzi, Li Lingfeng, and the others, making them feel endless pressure. Dan Chenzi performed a Taoist incantation gesture with his hand, and thousands of tiny golden threads of light coiled around him. Those were the golden needles he had refined. Under Dan Chenzi's control, the thousands of golden threads launched an all-encompassing attack on the dozens of corpse soldiers. However, the corpse soldiers did not feel pain, and they did not care about death. They let the thousands of golden needles hit their bodies, but they still held the ancient spears and attacked Dan Chenzi. The thousands of golden needles shot on the lifeless bodies of the corpse soldiers, but they only created some sparks before they were knocked away, unable to pierce into their bodies. Whoosh! A corpse soldier wielded an ancient spear and thrust it directly at Dan Chenzi's abdomen. The rusty spearhead rapidly streaked across the air, giving off a sharp sonic boom. A simple spear thrust was difficult for Dan Chenzi to block, so he could only retreat. After dodging the spear thrust, there was another sound of the air being torn apart, and a few ancient spears stab at him from the side. The thousands of golden needles around Dan Chenzi could not block the spears. The rusty ancient spear directly broke through the golden needles and stabbed at Dan Chenzi's body. Fleeting shadow! At the critical moment, Dan Chenzi's body turned into several shadows, and like a puff of smoke, he rushed out of the gaps between the ancient spears of the corpse soldiers. However, someone was not as lucky as Dan Chenzi. There was a scream, and a disciple of the Guanqing celestial sect was picked up by an ancient spear. The disciple suffered a fatal injury. His flying sword immediately became dim, and without light. With a clang, it fell from the sky to the ground. The ancient spear pierced through the chest of the Guanqing celestial sect disciple. Blood sprayed out, and the corpse soldier holding the ancient spear was bathed in a rain of blood. Everyone was greatly shocked. The other disciples of the Guanqing immortal sect even cried out in anger and grief. They all commanded their flying swords to attack that corpse soldier. The corpse soldier that was holding an ancient spear and had lifted a disciple of the Guanqing celestial sect into the air shook the ancient spear in his hand. That disciple of the Guanqing celestial sect instantly turned into a bloody mist with a bang! And exploded. The corpse soldier was enveloped in a bloody mist. 4 sword lights, like flood dragons, broke through the bloody mist around the corpse soldier's body. Chi! The corpse soldier was directly killed by the waste. However, the 4 disciples of the Guanqing celestial sect, who were shocked and angry, did not manage to cut the corpse soldier that killed their fellow disciple into pieces. The 4 rays of sword light killed the corpse soldier's body, but they could not even cut through its deathly white skin. The corpse soldier waved its ancient spear and swept the 4 rays of sword light away. While the corpse soldier was sweeping the sword light away, it was actually absorbing the blood mist around it. In just a few breaths, the blood mist around the corpse soldier seeped into its skin and was absorbed into its body. Roar! After absorbing the essence blood of the Guanqing celestial sect disciple, the corpse soldier actually let out an inhuman roar. That roar made everyone's scalp go numb. Everyone's expression changed. Gu Fei and the old tortoise followed the sound of the battle and rushed over. In an instant, they saw someone being killed by the corpse soldier, and they could not help but be shocked. The inhuman roar of the corpse soldier made Gu Fei feel like he was in hell. Gu Fei and the old tortoise were still dozens of feet away from the crowd. Moreover, the grayish-brown mist was floating on the street, and the people who were surrounded were all attracted by the roar of the corpse soldier. They did not know that Gu Fei and the old tortoise had arrived. Gu Fei and the old tortoise wanted to go forward and meet with the crowd, but heavy footsteps came from the houses on both sides of the street. Corpse soldiers holding ancient spears walked out from both sides of the street and blocked Gu Fei and the old tortoise. The corpse soldiers had gray pupils, wooden faces, and deathly white skin. These corpse soldiers were like puppets, and they surrounded Gu Fei and the old tortoise. These were terrible killing machines without any feelings. They were a group of walking corpses that could attack all creatures that broke into the ancient city. Gu Fei and the old tortoise immediately changed their expressions. Kill! Gu Fei was very direct and straightforward. Without any hesitation, he made his move. The ancient sword shadow condensed by the essence of the divine weapon turned into rays of dazzling sword chi and slashed at the corpse soldiers that besieged them. Chi! 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 The sword chi tore through the void, and 3 corpse soldiers holding ancient spears were immediately cut in half at the waist. There was not a single scream, no splashing of blood, and not even a trace of the smell of blood. Even these evil corpse soldiers could not resist the sharpness of the treasure-grade divine weapon, although the bodies of these corpse soldiers were no longer ordinary flesh and blood. The 3 corpse soldiers were instantly cut into 6 pieces at the waist and fell to the ground. However, these corpse soldiers that were cut at the waist quickly pieced their bodies back together under Gu Fei's shocked gaze. The 2 parts of their bodies actually merged in an instant, and they stood up on the ground again with ancient spears in their hands. Hiss! Gu Fei and the old tortoise gasped at the same time. Were these corpse soldiers really indestructible? The man and the tortoise were dumbfounded. At this time, the people who were besieged by the corpse soldiers also noticed the strangeness on Gu Fei's side and knew that Gu Fei had arrived. However, when they saw the old tortoise next to Gu Fei, they could not hide the surprise in their eyes. Is this the legendary dragon tortoise? Dan Qinzi was very knowledgeable. After seeing the appearance of the old tortoise, he was also shocked and blurted out. However, at this time, the people had no time to pay attention to why the legendary dragon tortoise would appear in this ancient city with Gu Fei, because they were still in danger. Old tortoise, quickly think of a way to deal with these walking corpses. There was a hint of anxiety in Gu Fei's words. With a wave of his hand, rays of sword she rushed out and dismembered the corpse soldiers that were attacking him. However, in an instant, these dismembered corpse soldiers recovered, stood up from the ground, and continued to attack Gu Fei. This was too terrifying. In the face of a group of extremely evil monsters that were not afraid of death, fighting, and being dismembered, no one could remain calm. How do I know how to deal with these damn things? The old tortoise was also extremely depressed. Bang! 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 The old tortoise waved the stone turtle shell and smashed 5 or 6 corpse soldiers in succession. The 5 or 6 corpse soldiers were either smashed by the stone turtle shell into their chests, or had a large part of their chests caved in, their tendons were broken, and their bones were fractured, or their entire bodies were smashed out of shape. Even so, these corpse soldiers that were smashed by the old tortoise quickly got up from the ground. Then, with heavy steps, they waved the ancient spears in their hands and attacked the old tortoise. At this time, there were more and more corpse soldiers coming out from the streets. This is so strange. Let's not care so much. Breaking out of the encirclement is more important. The old tortoise swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and cold sweat oozed out of his old face. Okay, you and I will work together to blast these monsters away. We will gather first and then break out of the encirclement together. As he spoke, Gu Fei waved the long sword in his hand and cut down a corpse soldier. However, it was useless. It was difficult to destroy the corpse soldiers by relying on the sharpness of the magic weapon alone. The corpse soldiers that were cut down by the sword would instantly get up from the ground again. However, in the few breaths of time that the corpse soldiers recovered, Gu Fei and the old tortoise had created a precious opportunity to escape. Although it took a short time for the corpse soldiers to fully recover, it was enough for Gu Fei and the old tortoise. "You brat, I don't know if you're stupid or if you're really loyal. You're still thinking about others at a time like this." The old tortoise shook its head. With that, the old tortoise enlarged the stone tortoise shell to the size of a house and threw it in the direction of Dan Chenzi, Li Lingfeng, and the others who were trapped on the street. The moment the stone tortoise shell was thrown out, the old tortoise and Gu Fei jumped onto the back of the stone tortoise shell. The stone tortoise shell that was as huge as a house slid quickly on the ground, and the corpse soldiers in its path were smashed away like broken sacks. Boom! 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 Many corpse soldiers that were knocked away by the stone tortoise shell smashed into the houses on both sides of the street. Some of the already dilapidated houses collapsed directly, causing dust to fly everywhere. Nothing could stop the stone tortoise shell in its path, not even the powerful and evil corpse soldiers. Soon, the stone tortoise shell rushed to where Dan Chenzi and the others were. Everyone was pleasantly surprised and jumped onto the stone tortoise shell. However, someone was very unlucky. He was intercepted by the corpse soldiers in the process of jumping onto the stone tortoise shell. The result was very tragic. He was surrounded by the corpse soldiers. There was only one outcome for him: death. Another disciple of the Guangqing immortal sect had died in the ancient city. The disciple's flying sword also fell into the dust, its glow dimming. It was a rare flying sword that had been tempered 100 times, but no one dared to pick it up. Li Mengyao and the other disciples of the Guangqing immortal sect all had sad expressions on their faces. The death of 2 of their fellow disciples was hard for them to accept. After all, those 2 disciples were fellow disciples who had cultivated with them since they were young. They had a deep bond with each other. The moment the 2 disciples of the Guangqing immortal sect died in the ancient city, 2 of the 33 green lamps floating above the altar at the entrance of the void sky realm were extinguished one after another. Taoist Li Shang, who was sitting cross-legged at the center of the formation, suddenly opened his eyes. His expression became slightly unsightly, because the 2 primordial spirit green lamps that were extinguished just now belonged to the disciples of the Guangqing immortal sect. In other words, 2 disciples of the Guangqing immortal sect had died in the void sky realm. The old tortoise controlled the stone tortoise shell to carry everyone out of the encirclement. At this time, hundreds of corpse soldiers had already gathered on the nearby streets, but they could not stop Gu Fei and the others. Chapter 176. In front of the stone wall at the end of the sky-splitting valley, a huge formation pattern was glowing with a misty multicolored light. Those mysterious spell symbols seemed to have come alive, flowing with streams of divine light. The enormous altar sat in the eye of the spell formation, gathering the spiritual energy, the sun, the moon, the quintessence of plants and vegetation, and even the power of the heavenly mansions. Over the past few days, in addition to the 2 stars of the monster and the demon that were gradually fading, the 7 mansions of the azure dragon in the east, the 7 mansions of the white tiger in the west, the 7 mansions of the vermilion bird in the south, and the 7 mansions of the black tortoise in the north also appeared in the sky at the same time. Those who paid attention would discover that in the sky, the demon star and the demon star were competing for glory. In the sky, the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise appeared. Only those old monsters in the Tinglong continent who had been living in seclusion knew what the strange astronomical phenomenon that occurred once every 260 years meant. The great formation and the altar gathered endless power in order to support an energy passage to the virtual sky world. Endless spiritual chi of heaven and earth and the power of the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, the black tortoise, and the 4-star mansions converged on the altar, opening the barrier between the real world and the void heaven realm. A vast power locked the ancient stone door in place. The 4-colored passage behind the stone door remained stable. However, this state could not be maintained for long. The effects of the 7 murders of the Devil Star were gradually fading away, and the world would once again return to peace. It was already the 4th day. Taoist Li Shang, who was controlling the formation at the center of the altar, received the news that 2 disciples of his sect had died. 2 of the 33 nascent soul lamps hovering above the altar had already been extinguished, and there were still 31 nascent soul lamps emitting a misty green glow. 33 nascent divinity green lamps represented the 33 people who had been chosen by the 3 great Taoist sects to enter the ruin heaven realm. Only those who had been chosen could enjoy such treatment. Anyone who entered the void heaven realm with a drop of their blood essence would be able to connect to countless worlds within 10,000 kilometers. No matter where they were or what kind of danger they encountered, as long as they didn't die, their nascent divinity green lamps would never go out. If the nascent divinity lamp went out, it meant that the person in the ruin heaven realm had died. However, the cyan-robed disciples who had rushed into the ruin heaven realm when the stone gate was opened and the passage between the ruin heaven realm and the outside world didn't receive such treatment. Although those disciples had reached the transcending mortality stage, their cultivation bases would be suppressed to the awakening 9th heaven after entering the ruin heaven realm. The cyan-robed disciples who entered the ruined sky realm did not have any advantages, and even if they died, the people outside would not know. Life and death were decreed by fate. After entering the ruin heaven realm, everything would be up to one's luck. Even if one encountered danger and died inside, one could not blame others. Everything was their own choice. The stone door on the stone wall was still open, and the passageway with flowing 4-colored light was still serving as the bridge between the great heaven and earth and the void heaven realm. With the end of the demon star-charged 7 murders, the disturbed heaven and earth power began to return to the right track, affecting the passageway. The extinguishing of the 2 nascent divinity lamps alarmed Taoist Li Shang. However, he only raised his head and glanced at the 2 extinguished nascent divinity lamps, then waved his hand. The extinguished nascent divinity lamps immediately disappeared silently from the sky above the altar. Only 31 nascent divinity lamps were left floating above the altar. Then, Taoist Li Shang slowly closed his eyes again, as if he had turned into an ancient stone statue, sitting cross-legged in the center of the formation in the altar. Around the great formation, on the cliffs on both sides of the canyon, stood a group of cyan-robed disciples with solemn expressions. They also had the opportunity to enter the ruin heaven realm, but they had given it up. Among these cyan-robed disciples, there were handsome young men, middle-aged men with black beards that reached their chests, and white-haired old men. Among them, there were disciples from the Taishan sect, the Guanqing Immortal sect, and the Shangqing sect. Each of them had guarded the Split Sky Valley for at least 2 60-year cycles, or 120 years. Some of them were not inferior to Dan Chinzi, and the others in terms of cultivation bases. Cultivators in the transcending mortality realm were reborn and had a lifespan of 500 years. Some of them had guarded the Split Sky Valley for more than 2 60-year cycles. In fact, if the dozen or so cyan-robed disciples who entered the ruin heaven realm had any other choice, they would definitely not take this risk. Their lifespans were coming to an end, but their cultivation base was stagnant. Therefore, they had no choice but to enter the ruin heaven realm to search for the opportunity to break through the shackles of cultivation. The disciples of the 3 great Taoist sects who had not entered the ruin heaven realm were all gathered here, guarding the great formation that was in operation. No one dared to relax for even a moment. Endless spiritual chi of heaven and earth converged toward the great formation from all directions, forming a funnel-shaped vortex of spiritual chi in the sky above the great formation. As the spiritual chi condensed, it gave off a bright light, causing the sky above the great formation to shine with thousands of auspicious lights. No one and no formation could conceal the energy fluctuations here, because the spiritual chi of heaven and earth gathered by the great formation was simply too enormous. The 2 old Taoists who presided over the opening of the ruin heaven realm were also very nervous, because they knew that every time the 3 great Taoist sects opened the ruin heaven realm, some old monsters would venture into the 100,000 mountain range to search for the location of the ruined heaven realm. To those old monsters on the Tinglong continent, the existence of the ruined heaven realm was no secret. However, because the people of the three great Taoist sects traveled to the ruined heaven realm by teleporting thousands of miles, no one knew where the ruined heaven realm was in the 100,000 mountain range for thousands of years. 6 more days. The two old Taoists sitting cross-legged on the cliff felt like a year. Time seemed to have become especially long for them, and they could not wait for the 6 days to pass in the blink of an eye. The sun hung high above the mountains in the west, illuminating the western sky with a fiery red light. As the red sun set in the west, the spiritual chi that converged toward the sky above the split sky valley from all directions became even more dazzling. The dazzling light gave off a vast and terrifying energy fluctuation that could be clearly seen from hundreds of miles away. Ha ha! At this moment, a long laugh rang out from the mountains in the south. The voice rumbled like thunder, echoing in the mountains for a long time. So it's here! The voice of the newcomer was so loud that it caused the mountains to shake. The few clouds floating in the sky were scattered. The ears of the disciples in the sky-splitting valley were ringing, and their faces were pale. Those with weaker cultivations were on the verge of collapsing. The sudden change made everyone's expression change. Whoosh! The two old Taoists sitting cross-legged on the cliff immediately stood up and soared into the sky. Standing in the void, they swept their gazes in the direction of the voice like lightning. At this moment, the two old Taoists, who were so old that they had only a few teeth left, their hair was almost all gone, and their skin was wrinkled. They seemed to be on the verge of death. What they were worried about had finally happened. Someone had finally found this place. On the summit of a mountain 100 miles south of the sky-splitting valley, monstrous devil chi surged up fiercely. In an instant, the devil chi covered the sky and covered the earth, rushing towards the sky-splitting valley like a galloping horse. Sons of bitches from the Taoist sects, your doomsday is here! A gloomy and murderous voice came from the devil chi, and a tall devil shadow loomed in the billowing devil chi. The gloomy and terrifying aura coming from the devil chi made everyone feel a bone-piercing chill from the bottom of their hearts. The green-robed disciples who were guarding the formation immediately stirred up a commotion. Where did you come from? How dare you boast shamelessly? At this moment, the two old Taoists no longer looked old. With angry roars, the two old Taoists turned into two bolts of lightning and rushed toward the surging devil chi. Cut the crap! Once I kill you, the ruined sky realm will belong to me, the demon monarch of 6 paths. The billowing devil chi directly enveloped the two old Taoists. It turned out that the demon monarch of 6 paths had found this place. Heavenly demon disrupts the universe, devil fire burns heaven and earth. With a loud roar, the billowing devil chi seemed to be ignited, and the pitch-black heavenly demon fire swept toward the two old Taoists from all directions. The terrifying devil chi was bone-piercingly cold. Wherever it was enveloped, even the void rippled. You have devilish flames, and I have divine flames. Let's see if your devilish flames will refine us, or if our divine flames will burn you, a devil, to ashes. Heaven's raging fire refines the true devil. The two old Taoists, who were enveloped by the devil chi, shouted in unison. At the same time, a large banner that flickered with fiery light appeared in their hands. The two old Taoists waved their banners, and 6 balls of fire appeared on each of the banners. They were like 6 suns, and they blocked the devil fire that was sweeping towards the two of them. Each of the 2 raging flame god banners released 6 balls of true yang fire. It was as if 12 suns had suddenly appeared in the rolling demonic clouds. The surging true yang chi was like a monstrous wave. Not only did it evaporate the surging demonic flames into wisps of green smoke, but it also caused the overwhelming demonic clouds to show signs of dispersing. 6 yang real fire? A cry of alarm came from within the demonic cloud. Then, a beam of blood-red light shot out from within the demonic cloud like a demonic blood-red dragon. It broke through the 12 balls of true yang chi surrounding the two old Taoists, and twisted around the 2 6 sun banners like a bolt of lightning. The 6 young real fire banners in the hands of the 2 old Taoists were twisted into 2 pieces by the blood-red light, and the true yang qi condensed on the banners immediately dispersed. "It's the heavenly devil saber!" The 2 old Taoists were shocked. Obviously, they had recognized the origin of the blood-red light. The 2 old Taoists directly disappeared, rushed out of the devil qi, and flew toward the sky-splitting valley without looking back. The 2 old Taoist self-refined magic weapons had been destroyed, and they knew that they could not resist the demon monarch of 6 paths, who had the heavenly devil saber, so they could only retreat. The 2 old Taoists rushed into the sky-splitting valley as if they were running for their lives. At this time, a strong wind blew in the sky, and the devil qi covered the sun. The 6 young banners were destroyed, and the 6 young real fire was instantly refined by the devil qi. Then, 2 blood-red demon claws suddenly appeared in the devil qi, grabbing toward the palace of 3 origins at the bottom of the sky-splitting valley. Chilly wind blew, and the devil qi surged. The huge blood-red demon claws were 4 to 5 feet long, which was really terrifying. The disciples who were watching the battle at the end of the sky-splitting valley all felt a chill in their hearts. Such a terrifying scene was really too evil. However, Gu Fei and the others in the ruined sky realm did not know that apart from being trapped in the primordial ominous city, they also had to face a great danger from outside the ruined sky realm. Chapter 177. Demon Emperor of 6 Paths had found the sky-splitting valley in the innumerable huge mountains, which shocked all the guards of the sky-splitting valley. The legendary ruined sky realm even made the Demon Emperor of 6 Paths jealous. He even entered the innumerable huge mountains which were full of unknown dangers to find the ruined sky realm. Of course, Demon Emperor of 6 Paths wasn't the only one who entered the innumerable huge mountains. Undeniably, this peerless demon was really lucky. He had sensed the abnormal phenomenon in the sky-splitting valley. Therefore, he immediately rushed towards the sky-splitting valley with his supreme demonic might. Demon Emperor of 6 Paths, who had been severely wounded by Taoist Chaoyang, the first seat of Shaoyang Peak of Taixian sect outside Dragon Emperor City, seemed to have recovered to his peak state in only a dozen days after the Demon Star Rush 7 kills. Demon Emperor of 6 Paths broke the 6 sun banner with his saber, and scared off the 2 old Taoists. Then, he descended upon the sky-splitting valley with his supreme demonic might. The demonic clouds covered the sky and covered the earth in an instant. In the sky-splitting valley, the sky turned dark and the earth turned dark. The day turned into night. A bloody demonic claw reached out of the rolling demonic clouds and directly grabbed towards the palace of 3 origins in the valley. Demon Emperor of 6 Paths planned to kill the 2 old Taoists who had rushed into the palace below before attacking the disciples at the end of the sky-splitting valley. Now that he had found this place, Demon Emperor of 6 Paths was not in a hurry anymore. He wanted to get rid of those who could pose a threat to him first before occupying the legendary ruined sky realm. Rumble! A huge blood-colored demonic claw descended from the sky. The space covered by the demonic claw seemed to be on the verge of collapsing as it trembled violently. When the claw was about to smash the palace of 3 origins into pieces. Bang! With a bang sound, that blood-colored demonic claw that came crashing down seemed to have met with resistance, and was actually repelled. During this entire process, the blood-colored demonic claw started to crumble and dissipate before disappearing into the void. Transparent ripples appeared above the palace of 3 origins. There seemed to be a transparent energy covering the entire palace of 3 origins, and blocking the attack of the demonic claw. "Who's there?" A loud voice came from the rolling demonic clouds, causing the entire sky-splitting valley to tremble and the broken stones on the cliffs on both sides of the valley to roll down constantly. Demon Emperor of 6 Paths felt uneasy. "Humph! A mere avatar dares to come out and stir up trouble. Do you really think that there's no one left in the Tao sect?" An old voice came from the Hall of 3 Yuan below. The voice was not loud, but it seemed to have spread across the sky and the earth. Everyone at the end of the broken sky valley was shocked to the extreme. Such a terrifying demon was actually just a clone. How powerful was the true body of this demon! Everyone could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. At this moment, Taoist Li Shang, who was sitting cross-legged at the center of the altar like a stone statue, also opened his eyes and stood up from the altar. Demon Monarch of Six Paths. Taoist Li Shang looked up at the rolling demonic clouds in the sky, and his eyes shot out two rays of light as sharp as divine swords. Taoist Li Shang's long hair fluttered even though there was no wind, and his body faintly emitted an extremely obscure sword chi, like a peerless divine sword that had awakened in his body. However, even though Taoist Li Shang's battle intent was like a rainbow, he could not fly into the sky to fight Demon Emperor of Six Paths, because he could not leave the center of the altar. Could it be that you are? Demon Monarch of Six Paths' voice was filled with fear. Then, the demonic clouds surged, and a 1,000-meter-tall demonic shadow appeared in the sky. Its huge and ferocious head looked down from the sky. Whoosh! An old Taoist in a white robe, white beard, white hair, and white eyebrows suddenly appeared in front of the huge demonic shadow, as if the huge demonic shadow could crush the old Taoist with one finger. The huge demonic shadow formed a sharp contrast with the thin figure of the old Taoist, as if the demonic shadow could pinch the old Taoist to death with one finger. The old Taoist's body did not emit any fluctuations of power, but he could stand in the sky and face the huge demonic shadow. The right side of the old Taoist's face was as red as a baby's, but the left side of his face was wrinkled, as if the skin of a dried orange was stuck to his face. At first glance, he looked like half a skull. This old Taoist was the one who had sat cross-legged on the roof of the temple that night, the one who had shown interest in Gu Fei. Under the white robe, one could clearly see that the right side of the old Taoist's body was full of muscles, full of vitality. However, the left side of his body was shriveled, thin, and lifeless. Life and death, two diametrically opposed auras, appeared on the body of one person. Anyone who saw this would be shocked, and find it hard to believe. It's you! It's really you! You're not dead yet! Demon Emperor of Six Paths suddenly cried out in surprise, as if he had seen through the old Taoist's background. The rolling demonic clouds retreated like a tide, and the huge demonic shadow dissipated instantly, turning back into a surging demonic aura. Demon Emperor of Six Paths, who was hiding in the demonic clouds, did not even show his face, as if his buttocks were on fire, and he fled directly to the south. Where did you come from? Go back to where you came from! The sky-covering demonic clouds retreated in an instant, and the sky above the sky-splitting valley shone brightly. Under the illumination of the setting sun, a mass of demonic clouds was as fast as a galloping horse, and in the blink of an eye, it was dozens of miles away. Everyone thought that a great battle was inevitable, but the Demon Emperor of Six Paths had suddenly fled. This left the disciples of the sky-splitting valley dumbfounded. No one had expected that the menacing Demon Emperor of Six Paths would flee. This was truly out of everyone's expectations. The Demon Emperor of Six Paths was actually afraid of Kurong Taoist, who had half a withered body and half a flourishing body. He did not even have the courage to attack. Since you're already here, don't leave, Master Kurong said faintly. His hoarse voice was clearly heard by everyone. Then, Kurong Taoist took a step in the void and disappeared from where he was. It was as if he had teleported, and he appeared dozens of miles away. Kurong Taoist caught up with the fleeing demonic clouds and black aura in an instant. Roar! An earth-shattering roar was heard coming from the demonic clouds that were moving forward rapidly. Subsequently, a 3,000 feet long blood radiance broke through the layers of demonic aura and headed straight for Kurong Taoist, who was chasing after it. The 3,000 feet long blood saber radiance was accompanied by saber chi that looked like waves of blood. It emitted a ferocious aura and tore the void apart as if it was going to split heaven and earth in half. It was extremely terrifying. Humph! Kurong Taoist sneered. He pinched a Taoist seal with his right hand and unhurriedly pushed it forward. The powers of life and death instantly surged toward the saber radiance like stormy waves. Bang! The saber radiance was instantly shattered by the powers of life and death. It turned into an endless blood radiance that scattered in all directions. Following that, Kurong Taoist formed another seal with both hands. Boom! As soon as the Taoist seal appeared, heaven and earth shook violently. Following that, illusory images of flowers, grass, and trees appeared around Kurong Taoist. The flowers, grass, and trees withered quickly, but they were instantly revitalized. Life and death changed between Kurong Taoist's fingers, from life to death, from death to life, and from life to death. It was as if countless reincarnations were being repeated. Samsara of life and death. Kurong Taoist's hoarse voice echoed in heaven and earth. Heaven and earth were instantly shrouded by the power of life and death, and the escaping demonic aura was also devoured by the space of life and death. Roar! Inside the demonic clouds, the demon lord of 6 paths roared furiously. The power of life and death was erasing his demonic aura, causing the clouds to dissipate rapidly. Finally, a red-haired young man with a devilish blood saber emerged from the demonic aura. The demon lord of 6 paths, the great villain from the demon domain who was known throughout the Tinglong continent, was an evil red-haired young man. The mighty power of the cycle of life and death completely confined the demon lord of 6 paths in the sky, causing him to age rapidly. It was as if time in the space of life and death had been sped up by thousands of times. In an instant, the demon lord of 6 paths turned from an evil young man to a skinny old man. In the end, the flesh and blood of the demon monarch of 6 paths decayed, revealing a pitch-black demon skeleton. However, there was still a soul fire flickering in the skull of the demon monarch of 6 paths. He had not been erased yet. Although the demon lord of 6 paths was only a clone, he still had a body and flesh. The power of the cycle of life and death caused his demonic body to decay quickly, but the demonic bone quickly grew flesh and blood again in an instant. From life to death and back to life again, the demon lord of 6 paths seemed to have gone through a cycle of life and death. His clone was severely injured, and the fluctuation of his soul had become extremely weak. Under the influence of old Taoist Kurong's cycle of life and death, the woodland below was also undergoing a cycle of life and death. The mighty power of the cycle of life and death was erasing the mark of life. After the demon lord of 6 paths experienced the second cycle of life and death, his clone completely disappeared. Even the shiny black demonic bone turned into bone powder and sprinkled down from the sky. Just like that, the demon lord of 6 paths' powerful clone was erased by old Taoist Kurong. The moment the clone completely disappeared, a red-haired young man opened his eyes in a demonic hall in the northern demon domain. His blood-red pupils shone with a terrifying bloody light. A drop of demonic blood seeped out from between the young man's eyebrows and slid down his face. After old Taoist Kurong killed the clone of the demon lord of 6 paths, he raised his hand and took the sky demon saber, which was floating in the air. Then, he returned to the 3 Eons palace. Everything on the demon lord of 6 paths was erased, but the sky demon saber was not damaged by the mighty power of life and death. "Greetings, Grand Master!" At that moment, the 2 old Taoists, who were forced to retreat into the 3 Eons palace by the demon lord of 6 paths clone, appeared out of nowhere. Old Taoist Kurong turned out to be their martial ancestor, which was really surprising. These 2 fellas were definitely old monsters, so wouldn't their martial ancestor be an antique figure? Old Taoist Kurong nodded and walked into the 3 Eons palace. The 2 old Taoists exchanged glances before they soared into the sky and flew toward the end of the Rift Valley. The storm outside the ruined sky realm had subsided. Meanwhile, inside the ruined sky realm, in the primordial vicious city, Gu Fei and the others had temporarily shaken off the pursuit of the undying corpse soldiers and fled into a relatively intact courtyard in the ancient city. Chapter 178. Apart from the indestructible corpse soldiers, there seemed to be nothing in the primordial ominous city that could be called human. There were no lights, no signs of life, and nothing alive. It was a huge city completely shrouded in death. Riding on the stone turtle shell, the old turtle carried everyone on a rampage. Fortunately, they got rid of the siege of the corpse soldiers, and finally rushed into a courtyard that was still in good condition. No one was happy. On the contrary, everyone's heart was extremely heavy, because no one knew what dangers were waiting for them next. However, they were temporarily safe after getting rid of the corpse soldiers, but no one knew how long this safety would last. In this ominous city, no one knew what would happen in the next moment, and no one knew what their fate would be in the next moment. Under the night sky, no stars could be seen in the sky of the ominous city. In the ruined sky realm, the stars seemed to be very close to the ground, but in this ominous city, there were no stars. In the courtyard, no one spoke. It was very quiet, except for the occasional sound of chilly wind blowing and the creaking of doors or windows swaying in the wind. However, everyone was very curious about the old turtle, and from time to time, they cast strange looks at it. It had the head of a dragon, but the body of a ghost. No one had ever seen such a demon. Everyone had already regarded the old turtle, who could speak human language, as a demon. It could speak human language, and had intelligence no less than that of a human. If it was not a demon, then what was it? Of course, these young disciples who had left the mountain for the first time had never seen a demon. They had only seen the description of demons in ancient records. However, everyone knew that a demon, who had achieved success in cultivation, was a terrifying existence. However, the old tortoise turned a blind eye to the strange gazes cast at it. It lay down under a withered tree that only had thick branches left. It crossed its legs in a leisurely manner. The old turtle's behavior puzzled everyone. Did it not want to leave this ominous city? Dan Chenzi, Li Lingfeng, and the others did not know that compared to the stone formation that trapped the old turtle, this huge city could be regarded as the difference between heaven and hell. At the very least, in this primordial ominous city, there was no great formation power constantly acting on the old tortoise. Although the immortal corpse soldiers were powerful, terrifying, and seemingly indestructible, if the old tortoise hid in its shell, the corpse soldiers would never be able to rush into the shell and drag him out. The old tortoise was fearless. How did you guys enter this ancient city? In the end, Gu Fei broke the silence and asked Ziyu in a low voice. Among his fellow disciples, only Ziyu and Li Lingfeng could still chat with him. As for the others, they didn't have much interaction with Gu Fei. As for Dong Fangchen and Lei Ao, there was no need to talk about them. They were defeated by Gu Fei during the 9 Peaks competition. Although they were from the same sect as Gu Fei, they only had hatred for Gu Fei and did not have a good impression of him. Among the 3 sword cultivators of the Guangqing Celestial sect, Gu Fei only knew Li Mengyao. The other 2 would not have any friendship with Gu Fei. Ziyu glanced at Dan Chenzi, who was sitting cross-legged in the courtyard, but he seemed to be somewhat embarrassed to speak. Could it be that Dan Chenzi had brought Li Lingfeng and the others into this ancient city? Gu Fei was a little surprised. A person like Dan Chenzi should be very cautious, so why was he so rash this time? Under Gu Fei's repeated questioning, Ziyu finally told him the whole story. It turned out that when Dan Chenzi and the others came to the vicinity of this huge city, they originally did not want to enter this ominous city. However, as they were walking around the city, rays of treasured light suddenly appeared in the city and shot into the sky. With Dan Chenzi's eyesight, he could immediately tell that this was the treasure light emitted by a psychic ancient treasure. Thus, Dan Chenzi determined that there was a psychic ancient treasure in this ancient city. A psychic ancient treasure. If they could obtain it, then the Taishan sect would become the leader of the 3 main Taoist sections. There were not many psychic ancient treasures in the cultivation world of the Tanglong continent. There were definitely no more than 10 known ancient treasures, and they all seemed to be incomplete. This kind of ancient treasure, in the eyes of martial cultivators, was definitely an existence of a rare treasure. If they could refine it into their own life treasure, their strength would definitely increase greatly, and they would probably be invincible among those of the same level. Thus, Dan Chenzi brought a group of disciples and took the risk to enter this ancient ominous city. Originally, after entering the ominous city, although they found that the city was filled with bones and it was not a good place to be, they did not encounter any danger along the way. However, when they reached the center of the ancient city, someone triggered some restrictive formation, and the atmosphere of the entire ominous city changed in an instant. It was as if a sleeping demon had been awakened. Wisps of gray fog began to rise in the city, and the atmosphere became lifeless. Then, those terrifying corpse soldiers jumped out of nowhere, walked out of the streets and alleys of the city, and rushed towards them. Ziyu thought of the situation when he was surrounded by those terrifying corpse soldiers and could not help but shiver. His handsome face, which would make even women jealous, also became pale. Flying swords, magic treasures, Taoist techniques, all kinds of magical powers seemed to be unable to cause any harm to those terrifying corpse soldiers that had already died countless years ago. These ancient corpses seemed to have indestructible bodies. Even a master like Dan Chenzi would find it difficult to fight against them. This was the most terrifying thing, because an enemy that could not be destroyed and could not be defeated was the most terrifying. Encountering this kind of enemy, in the end, it would be difficult to escape the fate of being killed. "There are ancient treasures in this ancient city?" Gu Fei exclaimed. "Then you guys saw ancient treasures in the center of the ancient city?" Gu Fei was very curious. What kind of ancient treasure would actually attract Dan Chenzi to take the risk to enter this primordial ominous city? At this time, the old tortoise lying under the withered tree also pricked up its ears to listen to Ziyu. This old tortoise seemed to be very interested in some ancient treasure in the ancient city. Ziyu lowered his voice and said, "There's nothing at all. The center of the ancient city is a huge square. In the center of the square, there seems to be a large cauldron." "Large cauldron?" Gu Fei could not help but be startled. He was a little surprised. "Large cauldron? What large cauldron? Are there countless strange birds, beasts, and strange creatures carved on the body of the cauldron?" Suddenly, a dragon head stretched out from the side. The two forked dragon horns almost pierced Gu Fei's and Ziyu's faces. Gu Fei and Ziyu both jumped in fright. "You old tortoise, you don't even make a sound when you walk. I was nearly scared to death by you." Gu Fei could not help scolding. It turned out that old tortoise actually arrived beside Gu Fei and Ziyu had no idea when, but the two people actually did not detect it in the slightest. "I also don't know what's on the cauldron body. I just looked at it from afar, and those monsters rushed out from all directions," Ziyu answered. When the people by the side saw that Gu Fei actually pointed at that tortoise demon and cursed, they could not help getting a huge shock. Some people even had cold sweat seeping out of their temples. If not for this tortoise demon displaying remarkable abilities earlier, they would probably have long lost their lives. Everyone still felt grateful towards this tortoise demon. "Stinking brat, come over! I have something to say to you." The old tortoise was indifferent towards Gu Fei's scolding and pulled Gu Fei to a corner of the courtyard with a mysterious look. Everyone could not help being curious just what this tortoise demon was going to say to Gu Fei. Everyone couldn't help but cast their gazes towards the two people in the corner. Even Dan Chenzi, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, opened his lightly closed eyes and cast a puzzled look at Gu Fei and the old tortoise. This dragon tortoise had an extraordinary origin. In the ancient records passed down on the Tinglong continent, the dragon tortoise was described as the son of a dragon. The dragon gave birth to 9 sons, and each son was different. This dragon tortoise with a dragon's head and a tortoise's body was one of the 9 sons. Of course, this was only something recorded in the ancient records and could no longer be investigated. As for whether this dragon tortoise before them was the son of a dragon, no one knew. Even those old monsters and antiques on the Tinglong continent most likely did not know about this ancient secret history. However, Dan Chenzi could conclude that this dragon tortoise had definitely not entered the ruined sky realm from the outside world. Instead, it had been in the ruined sky realm for a long time, and Gu Fei had encountered it. The dragon tortoise could be said to have an endless lifespan, so it definitely knew many secrets of the ruined sky realm. Dan Chenzi had a feeling that whether or not they could walk out of this ancient city would most likely depend on this dragon tortoise of unknown origin. This matter concerned the life and death of himself and his disciples, so Dan Chenzi did not dare to be careless in the slightest. "What the hell is going on?" Gu Fei said impatiently. In Gu Fei's heart, he had long believed that this old tortoise was definitely up to no good. The old tortoise glanced left and right with its tortoise eyes before lowering its voice and whispering in Gu Fei's ear. We have to make a trip to the square in the city." "What?" Gu Fei could not help but exclaim in a low voice. "Is this old tortoise crazy?" Li Ling Feng, Ziyu, and the others had encountered danger there. If they went back there, wouldn't they be walking right into a trap? Gu Fei hurriedly shook his head. He did not want to die at an early age. "Kid, if my guess is correct, there really is a great treasure there. That damned pervert actually left that thing behind. As long as we can control that thing, we might be able to get out of this ominous city," the old tortoise said hastily. Gu Fei could not help but be startled upon hearing this. He looked at the old tortoise doubtfully and asked, "We can get out of this ominous city?" To be honest, he did not quite believe the old tortoise's words. "Oh! What's with that expression? Don't tell me you don't believe an old man like me?" The old tortoise was immediately displeased when he saw that Gu Fei seemed to be suspicious of him. Gu Fei thought for a moment and then said, "That thing you're talking about, could it be the huge cauldron that Ziyu spoke of?" Gu Fei was not stupid. This old tortoise seemed to attach great importance to that huge cauldron. "It's that huge cauldron. Are you going or not? If you're not going, then I'll go myself. All of you can stay here and pray for your own luck." The old tortoise was acting shamelessly again. Gu Fei was about to answer when a cry of surprise suddenly resounded from the courtyard. After that, a thump could be heard as if something heavy had fallen to the ground. Gu Fei hurriedly looked towards the courtyard and saw a tall figure surrounded by a horrifying aura of death standing in the middle of the courtyard. The figure was clad in armor, his black hair fluttered in the wind, his gray pupils were devoid of any vitality, and his ghastly pale face was devoid of any expression. This was not a corpse soldier, but a corpse general that had been dead for countless years. This corpse general did not hold any weapons in his hands, yet he was even more terrifying. His appearance caused the temperature in the courtyard to plummet. Chapter 179. Just as the old turtle was pulling Gu Fei to a corner, discussing how to go to the center of the primordial ominous city to retrieve that cauldron, a corpse general emitting a heavy aura of death suddenly leaped into the courtyard. Swoosh! Everyone in the courtyard immediately dispersed. Clang! The sound of swords being unsheathed rang out. Li Mengyao and the other two sword cultivators of the Guangqing celestial sect activated the swords on their backs at the first instant. 3 beams of sword light circled around their bodies like spiritual snakes, emitting waves of cold sword chi. Immediately, gusts of cold wind blew in the courtyard. Dan Chenzi stood up from the ground and stared at this uninvited guest. The mana in his body was stirring, ready to attack the corpse general at any time. Li Lingfeng's purple gold 8 trigrams was already floating above his head. The power of the 8 phases of heaven and earth poured down from the purple gold 8 trigrams, enveloping him within. The 8 trigrams were faintly discernible around him. And in Ziyu's hand, there was also an additional spiritual branch with 7 emerald green leaves that were crystal clear like divine jade. That was the mystic treasure of the Taishan Peak, the 7 Leaves Treasure Tree. The 7 Leaves Treasure Tree in Ziyu's hand was refined from a branch of the spirit root. Misty wood elemental spiritual chi poured out, fusing with the wood elemental power on Ziyu's body. A huge wave of wood elemental mana surged out of Ziyu's body. Emerald green light circled around his body, and green vines actually emerged from the ground under his feet, wrapping around him. This was really surprising. The wood elemental power on Ziyu's body actually dispersed the aura of death in the ominous city around him. The powerful essence of life caused the green aura around his body to flourish. At this time, everyone took out their treasures, ready to attack that lifeless monster at any time. Although the tall corpse general had already been dead for countless years, it still made people feel his power and terror. His black armor was still considered complete, and it even faintly glowed with a layer of black light. Although he had no weapon in his hand, this corpse general was even more terrifying than those corpse soldiers with ancient spears. A pair of gray, lifeless eyes swept across the crowd. Everyone felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts. Who? The corpse general seemed to have locked onto Ziyu and directly threw a punch at her. Instantly, a strong gust of wind was generated in the courtyard. The space in front of the corpse general's fist trembled and twisted. Transparent ripples spread out. That corpse general punched out with a single punch, causing the entire world to tremble. This is... Gu Fei was shocked to see this. There was no fluctuation of magical power, and it was not a divine ability. The punch that the corpse general threw out seemed to be a martial arts battle technique. Retreat! Without any hesitation, Ziyu was like a wisp of green smoke, leaving behind an afterimage where he stood. In an instant, he retreated 100 feet away. Bang! The corpse general took a step forward, the force of his fist remaining unchanged, and it seemed as if he teleported as he instantly arrived before Ziyu, and he followed Ziyu like a shadow that was swift to the extreme. Hiss! Everyone who saw this scene gasped. Ziyu was even more shocked. He almost suspected that the monster that attacked him was not an inanimate object, but a living person. Otherwise, how could it be so powerful? Roar! Violet Feather let out a low roar, and vines quickly grew out from his body. Chi! 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 Vines danced around Ziyu's body, and like spirit snakes, they entangled the approaching corpse general. However, the corpse general's fist was like a landslide. The terrifying power directly shattered the entangling vines, and it directly blasted towards Ziyu. It was indomitable and unstoppable. This was a terrifying battle technique that originated from martial arts, but was close to Tao. In an instant, Ziyu was in danger. At this time, everyone had regained their senses. Hum! 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 Following the sound of 3 crisp sword chimes, 3 streaks of sword light that were like waterfalls, with a mighty sword aura, arrived in front of the corpse general like lightning. Bang! Ziyu brandished the 7-leaf treasured tree in his hand and forcefully collided with the corpse general's fist. The ferocious fist energy blasted Ziyu into the air and sent him tumbling backwards. Boom! Ziyu smashed through the wall behind him and fell into the room. Ziyu spat out a mouthful of blood. This monster's power clearly surpassed the self-awakening realm. This monster's power was not limited in the ruined sky realm. Clang! Light scattered everywhere, and in the instant that Ziyu was sent flying, 3 streaks of sword light that resembled dragons landed on the corpse general's body almost at the same time. In the next moment, a vast energy fluctuation suddenly erupted from the corpse general's body, and the 3 streaks of sword light were instantly sent flying by a great force. Li Mengyao and the others immediately felt as if their chests had been viciously smashed by 1,000 catty hammer. Their bodies swayed, and their faces instantly turned pale. A sword cultivator's flying swords were connected to their minds. When the flying swords suffered a fierce impact, as the owners of the flying swords, the minds of Li Mengyao and the others were also impacted at the same time. The corpse general was incomparably powerful, and the flying swords could hardly injure it. It strode forward, and chased after Ziyu in the room. At this time, everyone made their move. All kinds of Tao techniques and divine abilities were launched at the corpse general. For a moment, the courtyard burst forth with all kinds of dazzling light. Magic power surged, and powerful Tao techniques instantly drowned the corpse general. The 8 phases rotated, and Li Lingfeng drove the purple-gold 8 trigrams with all his strength. Kun, Jin, Sun, Zhen, Dui, Kan, the 8 trigrams of Li, each of which contained the power of one of the 8 phases of heaven and earth. The 8 trigrams of heaven and earth interweaved to form a deadly storm that emitted a heart-palpitating aura of destruction as it obliterated the corpse general. Dong Fang Chen's golden moon chakram also transformed into thousands of golden moonlight blades that tore through the air, emitting a sharp piercing sound as they slashed at the corpse general from all directions. Leo's 5 thunders execution directly attracted the 5 elements of heaven and earth. Thunderclaps shook the sky, and 5-colored lightning descended from the sky, striking at the corpse general. This was the true 5 thunders strike. Yin and Yang split heaven and earth, Palm and finger overturn heaven and earth. Waves of yin and yang power surged out from Qin Daoyun's palm, shaking the heavens and earth as it swept towards the corpse general. Roar! With an angry roar, the house that Ziyu was in instantly exploded. In the billowing smoke and dust, a giant emerald green tree appeared, emitting a terrifying wood elemental power, and smashed towards the corpse general's head. Everyone did not hold back and attacked with all their strength. However, just as the energy storm formed by everyone's strength engulfed the corpse general, everyone in the courtyard felt a terrifying ripple spread out from the energy storm. Then, it slowly expanded, and in the end, it turned into a huge wave that reached the heavens. Pun! A vast and unparalleled power erupted, like a stormy sea, directly collapsing everyone's power in an instant. Everyone's magic treasures were the first to be blown away, and everyone was also shaken by the mighty and irresistible power, vomiting blood and flying backward. The power that erupted from it was extremely strong, causing the entire world to shake. Sinister cracks appeared on the ground, as if the end of the world had arrived. The monstrous wave of power swept out, and the entire courtyard collapsed in an instant. The surrounding houses were instantly turned into ruins. Bricks, tiles, wood, doors, and windows were all swept into the air, and then exploded. A tall figure, like a god or a demon, walked out of the energy storm. Everyone was blown away by this power, and all of them were seriously injured. Even Danchunzi was no exception. He was sent flying dozens of feet away, and the 365 golden needles around him had already dimmed. The corpse general closed in on everyone like a god of death. Everyone could not help but despair. This monster was too powerful, and the corpse general's power did not seem to be suppressed by the power of heaven and earth in the ruined sky realm. Swish! Gu Fei suddenly appeared in front of the corpse general, and attacked with his strongest combat skill, the 5 elements exterminating seal. The power of the 5 elements surged out of the seal, and the 5 elements intertwined, pushing the power to the peak, and attacked the corpse general. Gu Fei attacked with all his strength, and he clearly felt the pressure from this world. The ruined sky realm did not allow the existence of power beyond the awakening self realm, but it seemed that this rule was specially used to deal with outsiders. Creatures that belonged to the ruined sky realm were not subject to any restrictions. Whoosh! The corpse general punched out again, and the power of the 5 elements was instantly dispersed by this simple and unadorned punch. In the face of absolute power, all skills were useless. The corpse general's fist destroyed Gu Fei's hand seal and slammed into Gu Fei's chest. Gu Fei instantly felt as though his internal organs had been flipped upside down. His entire skeleton felt as though it had been shattered by the fist, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, his body was sent flying like a broken sack. Bang! His figure tumbled into the dust. Rumble! Just as the corpse general sent Gu Fei flying and was about to attack and kill everyone, a huge stone turtle shell the size of a small mountain suddenly appeared above the corpse general's head, and pressed down like a huge mountain. The old turtle made a move. This guy seemed to like to take advantage of others and hit them from behind. Yes. It should be hitting the turtle shell. The corpse general was just a walking corpse without any intelligence. It did not know the danger, did not know how to dodge, and only knew how to fight based on instinct. The corpse general directly punched the stone turtle shell, and the unparalleled fist force made the entire huge turtle shell tremble violently. It actually shook the stone turtle shell that was as heavy as a mountain. This corpse general's battle strength was simply unparalleled. However, even though it managed to shake the stone tortoise shell that was descending from the sky, the corpse general could not escape its fate of being smashed into the ground. The stone tortoise shell that was as large as a mountain was unstoppable, and the corpse general was smashed into the ground like a wooden stake. The old turtle's stone turtle shell was really an extraordinary treasure, and it was always successful. Wherever the turtle shell went, it would be smashed regardless of whether one's battle strength was unparalleled or martial body was indestructible. Chapter 180. Hee, this is a good shell. The old turtle suddenly thought of something, then sat down cross-legged, waved his hand to call back the stone turtle shell on the ground, and suspended it over his head. Then, the old turtle opened his pseudo-world, and the power of heaven and earth poured down from the stone turtle shell, enveloping the old turtle. At this moment, the old turtle exuded an extremely powerful aura. The power of the pseudo-world swirled around him, making the old turtle seem to have jumped out of the 3 realms, out of the 5 elements, and out of the ruined sky realm. The power of heaven and earth in the ruined sky realm could no longer affect him. In this way, the old turtle was no longer suppressed by the power of heaven and earth in the ruined sky realm. Without the restraint of the shackles, his strength rose sharply, and rays of light emerged from his body. Through the hazy light, a hazy space could be seen looming in the huge stone turtle shell. However, there seemed to be no vegetation in that space, and it was barren. When the old turtle opened his pseudo-world and took the 18 incomparably powerful ancient tower fighting souls into it, it seemed that his pseudo-world had been seriously damaged, and the fairyland-like valley no longer existed. The old turtle's figure exuded a powerful and terrifying fluctuation, which made everyone's heart palpitate. It was a tremor that originated from the soul. The terrifying pressure was so heavy that it made it hard for everyone to breathe. Everyone who had been sent flying by the invincible corpse general was stunned by the scene in front of them. The powerful strength that the old turtle had displayed was beyond everyone's imagination. Even when facing the sect leader, it was not so oppressive. Could it be that this dragon turtle is even more powerful than the sect leader? Is it a demigod? Dan Chenzi was equally shocked. This old turtle. Gu Fei stood up shakily from a pile of ruins and stared at the terrible turtle's shadow in front of him in shock. Gu Fei was really surprised that this 10,000-year-old tortoise still had such a unique skill. This old guy really knew how to pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger. Under the power of the pseudo-world, the old turtle's cultivation was not suppressed by the ruined sky realm. After all, the old turtle's pseudo-world and the ruined sky realm were both pseudo-worlds created with supreme magic power. In essence, neither of them were truly complete worlds. Both of them existed on the same level. Under the shroud of the pseudo-heaven and earth power, the old tortoise's cultivation was unrestricted. Gu Fei wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He couldn't help but frown as he felt the intense pain from the corpse general's punch on his chest. He clearly felt a clear fistprint sink into his flesh. However, no one noticed that under Gu Fei's clothes, where his chest had been punched, there was a yin-yang fish ball emitting a misty brilliance. The dent in the fist mark on Gu Fei's chest was quickly fading and finally disappeared completely. Pung! The corpse general that had been smashed into the ground rushed out of the pit and threw a punch at Old Tortoise, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground. A vast fist force surged towards Old Tortoise like a surging river. This corpse general must have been a formidable martial arts expert when he was alive. He had cultivated his body to the point of being indestructible. Although he had been dead for countless years, the indestructible body of a martial artist still contained great power. A martial artist's power came from his own blood essence. As long as his body was not destroyed and his blood essence did not dry up, his power would not dissipate. Such an indestructible body of a martial artist still contained astonishing power. Humph! Old Tortoise snorted coldly. In the face of the unparalleled fist force that was rushing towards him, he still sat motionless and pressed his right hand forward. Bam! It collided head-on with the corpse general's fist. Old Tortoise was as still as a mountain, but the corpse general was sent flying hundreds of meters away. A house exploded under the corpse general's body. The corpse general had been dead for countless years. Its body did not decay, and it was a free-killing machine. It had no thoughts, and pain, danger, and life and death had nothing to do with it. Boom! The corpse general soared into the sky from the collapsed house. Its black hair fluttered in the air, and the deathly aura that surged from its body became even stronger. This corpse general, who only knew how to fight and kill, walked directly in the air and instinctively displayed the combat skills that it had learned when it was alive. It left a series of afterimages in the air and set off an unparalleled momentum. It pounced towards Old Tortoise again. It was fighting purely on instinct. Although it was already dead, this corpse general was still a powerful martial artist when it was alive. Even in death, its power was still there, and even in death, it still had the instinct to fight. Such an indestructible body of a martial artist was definitely a rare treasure for some evil cultivators. If one could control such an indestructible body with evil arts, it would be more terrifying than any magical weapon. Myriad transformations! At this moment, Old Tortoise actually closed his eyes and muttered to himself. Immediately, thousands of rays of light shone from Old Tortoise's body. Faint shadows floated out from his body. Yes, there were dozens of shadows. Although they were faint and indistinct, it was clear that they were all the Old Tortoise. Soul snatch! The Old Tortoise growled. The tortoise-like shadows that surrounded the Old Tortoise instantly rushed into his body. Then, the divine eye on his forehead appeared and split open. A beam of divine light shot out like lightning towards the corpse general. The divine light was extremely fast. In an instant, it had reached the corpse general. The corpse general waved its hand to block it, but the divine light seemed to be intangible. It directly penetrated the corpse general's palm and instantly hit the corpse general between its eyebrows. The corpse general that was pouncing towards it staggered and directly fell from the air. With a loud bang, it heavily smashed onto the ground. Roar! The corpse general that had not made a sound since its appearance actually held its head with both hands and screamed in pain. It seemed to have gone crazy. What's going on? Everyone was shocked to see the terrifying corpse general screaming in pain for no reason. They did not know what was going on. After doing all this, Old Tortoise seemed to be extremely weak. The incomparably powerful aura on its body receded like the tide. The stone tortoise shell floating above its head began to shrink rapidly. The pseudo-world that had been opened had also closed. The power of heaven and earth of the pseudo-world had disappeared, and the power of heaven and earth of the ruined sky realm had once again acted on Old Tortoise's body. Old Tortoise was drenched in sweat as if he had been fighting for 10 days and 10 nights. He seemed to be extremely exhausted. Waving his hand, he retrieved the stone tortoise shell and tried to stand up from the ground, but ultimately failed. Roar! Yuwa! That corpse general seemed to have gone mad. It rolled and struggled on the ground. The corpse general's immense strength caused the ground around it to explode. Everyone who witnessed this had a change in expression. Old Tortoise stared at the corpse general in front of him and murmured, "This guy's cultivation when he was alive was absolutely terrifying. I can't believe he still has such a strong resistance." After rolling and roaring for a while, the corpse general gradually calmed down and got up from the ground. Its pair of dead gray eyes seemed to have regained some vigor. Hiss! Everyone was taken aback. Could a corpse that had been dead for countless years still return to life? Only the knowledgeable Dan Chinzi furrowed his brows. He seemed to have thought of something and looked at the corpse general with a hint of astonishment in his eyes. Then, under everyone's shocked gazes, the terrifying corpse general actually walked step by step towards Old Tortoise, who was lying paralyzed on the ground. Everyone thought that Old Tortoise was about to be killed by the corpse general. Gu Fei was even more shocked. Disregarding the danger, he executed the 8 desolation steps and instantly arrived in front of the corpse general like a phantom. He was about to attack the corpse general. Everyone at the scene was seriously injured, and only a few people still had the strength to fight. However, only Gu Fei dared to face the ancient corpse general head-on. After several days of life and death, Gu Fei and Old Tortoise had developed a friendship. Gu Fei absolutely could not watch Old Tortoise be killed by the ancient corpse general without doing anything. "Smelly brat, stop!" Just as Gu Fei was about to form a hand seal, the paralyzed Old Tortoise unexpectedly shouted at Gu Fei to stop. Gu Fei couldn't help but be startled. At this time, the ancient corpse general had already walked in front of Old Tortoise. It didn't attack Old Tortoise, but like a loyal guard, it guarded Old Tortoise. Gu Fei couldn't help but be dumbfounded after seeing this scene. What exactly happened? Why did this terrifying ancient corpse general seem to have become Old Tortoise's subordinate? Gu Fei was about to ask, but at this time, the familiar and terrifying heavy footsteps once again came from the distance. Obviously, the commotion here had alarmed those ancient corpse soldiers. Gu Fei couldn't help but change his expression. That ancient corpse general suddenly bent down and carried Old Tortoise, who was paralyzed on the ground, on its shoulder. Everyone also came from all directions. "Martial uncle, what should we do?" Li Lingfeng asked Dan Qinzi. Everyone was injured. If those ancient corpse soldiers came, perhaps they wouldn't even be able to protect themselves. Dan Qinzi glanced at the disciples in front of him. He saw that Li Lingfeng, Ziyu, Dao Fangchen, and the others were all wearing tattered clothes, messy hair, and their white robes were stained with blood. He couldn't help but feel helpless. Finally, Dan Qinzi suddenly respectfully bowed to Old Tortoise, who was sitting on the ancient corpse general's shoulder, and said, "I hope Senior can point out the way for these juniors." "Hee hee! Of course, of course!" Old Tortoise pretended to be aloof and virtuous. He stroked the few dragon whiskers on his chin and nodded. Seeing Old Tortoise acting so pretentiously, Gu Fei was truly speechless. He really wanted to go forward and beat up this old swindler. However, after glancing at the lifeless ancient corpse general, Gu Fei suppressed his urge to go forward and slap the Old Tortoise. At this time, everyone could see that Old Tortoise had definitely done something to this ancient corpse general with unparalleled battle power. However, how did Old Tortoise subdue this ancient corpse general? Everyone was full of questions. "It is not that there is no way to get out of this ancient city, but—" Old Tortoise wanted to say something but hesitated. Dan Qinzi's eyes immediately lit up and he quickly said, "Senior, please speak." The other disciples were also very surprised. Only Gu Fei vaguely sensed Old Tortoise's intention. Sure enough, Old Tortoise's words directly confronted Gu Fei's suspicions. Old Tortoise said, "If you want to get out of this ancient city, you must first break the ancient city's formation, and the hub of the ancient city's formation is at the center." Chapter 181. At this time, the sounds of heavy footsteps and the clanking of armor came from all directions. Those ancient corpse soldiers were surrounding Dan Qinzi and Gu Fei's group from all directions. Obviously, the commotion here had alarmed the ancient corpse soldiers in this area. There was no more time to think. Right now, there were two paths in front of Gu Fei's group. One was a dead end, and the other was an unknown path of life or death. Blindly rushing out would, of course, result in death. With their injuries, no one had the confidence to break out of the siege of those terrifying ancient corpse soldiers. Since there was a chance of survival, they had to seize it. Therefore, Dan Qinzi and the group decided to follow the old turtle's instructions and return to the center of this ominous primordial city to break the ancient city's formation. Of course, the old turtle was the one who told them about the ancient city's formation. Everyone felt that this ominous city should not be just a simple formation. The ancient city was very strange. It seemed to be a dead city, a dead city. Even an experienced and knowledgeable cultivator like Dan Qinzi had never heard that these ominous formations could control the dead. Ancient corpse soldiers and ancient corpse generals were not undead creatures because their bodies were filled with a deathly aura and did not emit any soul fluctuations. Without any soul fluctuations, it was clear that these ancient corpse soldiers and ancient corpse generals were walking corpses without souls. Since they had decided to go to the center of the ancient city, everyone immediately moved because they could already see the terrifying figures of the ancient corpse soldiers that were approaching. Ancient corpse soldiers holding ancient spears appeared on the distant street. Their heavy footsteps were like heavy hammers pounding on everyone's hearts, causing them to feel an endless pressure. Those indestructible monsters made everyone feel powerless. After identifying the direction, the old turtle, who was sitting on the ancient corpse general's shoulder, commanded the ancient corpse general to clear the way in front. Everyone held their magical treasures and followed closely behind. A hazy purple sword shadow condensed in Gu Fei's right hand. He guided the essence of the divine weapon that had been refined into his body and condensed it into a sword. Although it wasn't a true divine weapon, it was more powerful than any divine weapon. Even these ancient corpse soldiers with indestructible bodies could still be cut in half by Gu Fei with just one slash. There were also ancient corpse soldiers in the direction they were heading. An imposing body, a broken armor, an ancient spear, a wooden expression, and an indomitable momentum. This was the portrayal of an ancient corpse soldier. After walking for 200 to 300 yang, the group turned onto an ancient street that led to the center of the ancient city. At the same time, they encountered the first batch of ancient corpse soldiers. They were 12 terrifying figures that were as tall as iron towers, pressing towards the group like 12 mountains. Ancient corpse soldiers with ancient spears came out from the surrounding houses. In the darkness of the night, no one knew how many ancient corpse soldiers were in the surrounding buildings. Hee hee! Let these walking corpses come and test the power of my avatar, the old turtle said with a smile. He simply didn't care about these terrifying ancient corpse soldiers. Avatar? Gu Fei was very puzzled. The old turtle's avatar seemed to be very different from the legendary celestial divine technique. Gu Fei didn't know that the old turtle's cultivation had fallen so much that it wasn't even 1,000th of its former self. How could it still display the true avatar technique? The old turtle's avatar technique was actually just a trick. It used great magic power to split a part of the soul and primordial spirit of the original body, and directly enter the other party's mud pill palace to take over the sea of consciousness and brain. In the ancient times, when there were many powerful experts, this technique to cultivate cloning was a common one. Almost every powerful cultivator knew how to use it. When those cultivators encountered a great tribulation that they couldn't resolve, they would capture some powerful cultivators or powerful demons and beasts. Then, they would use a secret technique to erase their divine senses and split a part of their soul and primordial spirit into the other party's sea of consciousness to take over everything. With a little bit of refinement, the target could become an avatar with the same strength as the original body. In this way, there would be an extra chance of survival during the tribulation. Even if the original body was destroyed, the avatar could continue to grow. Because the captured avatars were originally very powerful, they would only lose their spiritual wisdom after refinement. Therefore, once the avatar was successfully refined, it would be equivalent to combining the strength of the original body and the avatar. In other words, the avatar would be even stronger than the original body. The old turtle had used great magic power to split the primordial spirit, and consumed a lot of primordial spirit. Therefore, he still hadn't recovered yet. However, his avatar was extremely powerful. The 12 ancient corpse soldiers approached the crowd with the ancient spears in their hands pointed at them. These ancient corpse soldiers were definitely soldiers who had fought hundreds of battles on the battlefield before they died. Even after death, they still exuded a fierce, murderous aura. Without any hesitation, the ancient corpse general that had become the old turtle's avatar technique directly pressed its palm forward. A terrifying power immediately surged out from the ancient corpse general's palm. A super hurricane suddenly appeared in front of the ancient corpse general's palm, and the vast palm force directly swept the 12 ancient corpse soldiers into the air. Then, they instantly exploded, and their bones were smashed to pieces. That's right. The 12 impenetrable ancient corpse soldiers, which were impervious to magical treasures and Tao techniques, were blasted apart by the old turtle's clone with one palm strike. However, there was no scene of flesh and blood splattering everywhere. This was because the essence and blood of these ancient corpse soldiers had already solidified. However, an incredible scene really happened, and it still shocked everyone to the extreme. This was not an illusion, nor was it a dream. The indestructible ancient corpse soldiers were blasted into pieces. Let's go! The old turtle did not seem to be very happy about this result. Instead, he solemnly urged the crowd to rush out of the ancient corpse soldiers' encirclement. The crowd did not dare to be negligent. They followed closely behind the old turtle and ran along the ancient street. The ancient corpse soldiers came from all directions and chased after Gu Fei's group with ancient spears in their hands. At this time, the 12 ancient corpse soldiers were blasted into pieces by the old turtle's invincible avatar. The broken pieces of flesh and bones scattered on the ground began to surge. Then, the broken pieces of flesh and bones gradually gathered together, forming 12 piles of flesh and bones without any blood. Finally, the bodies, limbs, and heads were regenerated from the surging flesh and bones. 12 tall figures appeared from the surging flesh and bones. Not only did the 12 ancient corpse soldiers regenerate their flesh and blood, but even the armor on their bodies and the ancient spears in their hands also condensed. Then, the 12 ancient corpse soldiers rejoined the team that was chasing after Gu Fei's group. The ancient corpse soldiers in this primordial vicious city seemed to be truly indestructible. The ancient corpse soldiers were not the same as the ancient corpse general that was seized by the old turtle's avatar. The ancient corpse general was an indestructible body of a warrior. It had flesh and blood, and its essence and blood had not dried up. However, the essence and blood of these ancient corpse soldiers had long dried up and solidified. In other words, these ancient corpse soldiers were, at best, zombies that crawled out of their graves. But what kind of power made these zombies so indestructible? No one knew what was going on, but there was no doubt that the mysterious power that made the ancient corpse soldiers so proud of their indestructible power came from this primordial vicious city. The old turtle seemed to know that these ancient corpse soldiers were difficult to truly destroy, but it would take a certain amount of time for the shattered ancient corpse soldiers to recover. This was enough. The old turtle manipulated the ancient corpse soldier avatar to attack again and again, blasting the ancient corpse soldiers that were blocking the way into pieces. The ferocious power caused the houses on both sides of the street to collapse. Gradually, the number of white bones under everyone's feet began to increase. The closer they got to the central area of this primordial vicious city, the more white bones there were on the street. Gulyalu! The crowd quickly moved forward on the ancient street. Suddenly, from the dark street in front of them, in the grayish-brown mist, a skull rolled over. The sparkling, jade-like bone emitted a layer of misty brilliance, as if announcing to the crowd that this was the skull of an immortal god. This skull was blown by the chilly wind on the street, and rolled past the crowd. Gu Fei clearly saw that there were 5 finger holes on the skull. Gu Fei was shocked. This person was killed by a claw through the top of his skull. Obviously, there was someone more powerful than an immortal god, powerful enough to kill an immortal god. No one knew what happened in this primordial vicious city, or why so many immortals fell here. All of this was a mystery, a secret that even the old turtle didn't know. The crowd continued to move forward, and the old turtle continued to act as the vanguard. However, as the number of white bones under their feet increased, everyone's mood became heavier. The closer they got to the center of the ancient city, the more ancient corpse soldiers there were. From time to time, ancient corpse soldiers would rush out from both sides of the street to attack Gu Fei's group. It had to be said that this incarnation of the old turtle was truly powerful to the point of being abnormal. Every move it made could shake this part of the world. The ancient corpse soldiers that dared to stop the old turtle were bombarded into pieces. In front of this incarnation, these immortal ancient corpse soldiers had no power to fight back. The strength of ancient corpse soldiers and ancient corpse generals was like a newborn baby and an adult man. They were not on the same level and could not be compared at all. Suddenly, the old turtle stopped. The street under their feet had come to an end. Looking ahead, there was an open space with a grayish-brown mist drifting in the air. In the hazy mist, a huge black shadow loomed in the center of the open space. It was a huge cauldron that was 7 or 8 feet tall and 5 or 6 feet wide. Ha ha! The mountain and river cauldron, it really is the mountain and river cauldron. I can sense its aura, the old turtle said excitedly. Its eyes lit up like 2 bright stars. At this moment, Gu Fei felt a trace of soul fluctuation coming from the essence of the divine weapon that had condensed into an ancient sword shadow in his hand. Buzz! The sword shadow trembled and let out a faint sword cry. Gu Fei was extremely surprised because he felt that the sword soul in the divine weapon essence was showing signs of awakening again. Chapter 182. In the center of the primordial ominous city was a huge square surrounded by towering statues of deities. The statues were carved from large stones and were about 7 or 8 zhang tall. They were vivid and lifelike. Some were standing with swords, some were baring their teeth and glaring, and some were raising their magical weapons to attack. There were more than 100 statues standing around the square. Without exception, all of them were facing the three-legged cauldron in the center of the square, as if they were guarding it. Under the guidance of the old turtle, Gu Fei's group rushed out from an ancient street outside the square. The ancient corpse general controlled by the old turtle's avatar technique waved its hand and blasted away more than 10 ancient corpse soldiers that were rushing over. "Ha! It really is the mountain and river cauldron. I didn't expect this treasure to be in the hands of that damned pervert." After seeing the huge cauldron in the center of the square, the old turtle immediately shouted in excitement. "That damned pervert didn't take this treasure away. This time, this old turtle is really lucky." Having said that, the old turtle became spirited as if it had eaten a heavenly treasure. It then jumped down from the ancient corpse general's shoulder. "Go!" Without any hesitation, the old turtle shouted and pointed at the huge cauldron in the square. Whoosh! The ancient corpse general immediately disappeared from its spot and rushed toward the huge cauldron like the wind and lightning. Bang! 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 Heavy and intensive footsteps came from the direction of the huge cauldron. It was as if countless 1,000-pound hammers were constantly hitting the ground. Everyone felt the ground under their feet tremble. In the gray-brown mist, tall figures appeared one after another. Each of the ancient corpse soldiers was holding ancient spears. They were like an unshakable mountain as they rushed toward the ancient corpse general. Hundreds of ancient corpse soldiers rushed out from the mist. Although the armor on their bodies had lost its luster after countless years of erosion, and the ancient spears in their hands were mottled with rust, they appeared even more frightening. Then, several hundred ancient corpse soldiers rushed out from the street behind Gu Fei's group. Their bodies were covered in pitch-black armor, emitting an oppressive aura. They held rusty ancient swords and battle spears, directly attacking Gu Fei's group from behind. After the baptism of countless years, the broken armors, the rusty ancient swords, and the ancient spears seemed to have merged with the ancient corpse soldiers, emitting a terrifying aura that could frighten people's souls. Not only were Gu Fei and the other young cultivators shocked, but even Dan Qinzi and the other cultivators of the older generation, who were used to seeing storms, turned pale. The old turtle jumped up from the ground and charged forward. Everyone followed closely behind. Although there were only a few hundred ancient corpse soldiers coming from behind, when they gathered and charged together, their momentum was earth-shattering, as if they were a magnificent army with thousands of horses and horses. There were ancient corpse soldiers blocking the way in front and ancient corpse soldiers chasing them from behind. In just a short period of time, everyone was surrounded by more than 1,000 ancient corpse soldiers. Boom! In just a blink of an eye, the charging ancient corpse general fiercely collided with the ancient corpse soldiers coming from the front. The result was very shocking. It was like cutting melons and vegetables. The ancient corpse soldiers in the front were blown away one by one, and some were even broken into thousands of pieces, scattering on the square. Although the pieces of corpses were flying everywhere, there was no scene of blood splashing. The essence blood of the ancient corpse soldiers had long solidified. The battle spears were broken, and the ancient swords were shattered. In that brief moment of contact, more than half of the hundreds of ancient corpse soldiers holding spears and ancient swords were blown away by the invincible ancient corpse general. Everyone was overjoyed by the incomparably powerful ancient corpse general. This ancient corpse general, which was seized by the old tortoise's avatar, had become a protective talisman for everyone. In just 2 or 3 moves, the ancient corpse general had swept away the hundreds of ancient corpse soldiers that rushed out from the depths of the square. Although it couldn't completely eliminate the ancient corpse soldiers, for the time being, these hundreds of ancient corpse soldiers couldn't attack Gu Fei's group anymore. Their flesh and blood were surging. Destruction and regeneration, these two completely opposite phenomena appeared on the bodies of these ancient corpse soldiers. The wounded bodies were rapidly recovering. The broken spears and shattered swords reappeared in the hands of the ancient corpse soldiers. It was as if they were indelible and inextinguishable. One by one, the ancient corpse soldiers stood up from the ground and continued to chase after the crowd with their ancient weapons. At this time, everyone had already rushed past the wounded ancient corpse soldiers. However, when they saw the flesh and blood of the ancient corpse soldiers surging and their wounded bodies rapidly recovering, everyone's scalp went numb. Immortal corpse soldiers, what did this mean? Everyone couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. No one thought that they could safely escape from the siege of these immortal ancient corpse soldiers. Everyone was counting on the old tortoise to rush forward with him. The three-legged cauldron the size of a small mountain gradually appeared in front of everyone. An ancient aura rushed over. The closer they got to the giant cauldron, the more the sword shadow condensed in Gu Fei's hand trembled. The soul fluctuations on the sword shadow became more and more intense, and the illusory sword shadow began to flicker with a purple-gold light. This made Gu Fei extremely shocked. This situation was similar to the situation when they encountered the primordial ominous saber at the center of the formation in the stone forest. Could it be that the giant cauldron in front of them was a rare divine artifact? Only divine artifacts of the same level could resonate with each other. When the two met, there would definitely be a reaction. This was also the reason why the primordial ominous saber in the formation eye of the stone forest woke up from its slumber when it sensed the sword soul. Boom! With a loud bang, a vast force suddenly erupted, causing the world to tremble. When everyone approached the giant cauldron, a tall figure standing in front of the giant cauldron suddenly intercepted the old tortoise's avatar. Everyone immediately stopped. They were surprised to find that the tall figure that intercepted the ancient corpse general controlled by the old tortoise was also an ancient corpse general. The armor on its body was the same as the old tortoise's outer body incarnation. There was no difference. The power of the ancient corpse generals was clear for all to see. They were absolutely terrifying existences, there was no doubt about it. Just as everyone approached the giant cauldron in the center of the square, they unexpectedly encountered another ancient corpse general. Everyone couldn't help but be surprised. At this time, ancient corpse soldiers holding ancient weapons rushed out from all sides of the square and besieged everyone on the square. The hundreds of corpse soldiers that chased after Gu Fei's group also closed in. There was no way forward, and there were pursuers behind. For a moment, everyone fell into a dangerous situation where they were surrounded by enemies. Old Tortoise, quickly take care of that monster blocking the way! Gu Fei anxiously shouted at the old tortoise. Since the old tortoise could take care of an ancient corpse general, he could also take care of another ancient corpse general. You smelly brat, do you think splitting one's primordial spirit is an ordinary thing? The old tortoise couldn't help but feel depressed. With his current cultivation, splitting one primordial spirit was already his limit. Then what should we do? Gu Fei looked at the approaching ancient corpse soldiers and was sweating profusely. In the face of these immortal monsters, Gu Fei's heart gave birth to a sense of powerlessness. What else can we do? Let's just do it! The old tortoise snappily said. Bang! Boom! Pun! The two ancient corpse generals fiercely fought. Vast waves of yuan qi swept out, shaking the world. Even the giant cauldron was affected and trembled. The two figures moved as fast as lightning, and all kinds of combat skills were unleashed to attack each other. This was a collision of power, a confrontation between warriors, and there was no cost involved. However, the ancient corpse general controlled by the old tortoise's soul-splitting technique was unable to completely defeat the other ancient corpse general for a while. It became a situation where they were evenly matched. This was not a good thing. Time, for them, was a matter of life and death. Once they were delayed, their fates could be imagined. Roar! The ancient corpse general controlled by the old tortoise's soul-splitting technique roared and leaped into the sky. Then, it wielded its palms like a blade and slashed at the opponent in front of it. The dazzling saber light was like a long rainbow, piercing through the sky, tearing apart the air. The materialized saber-chi was more than 10 feet long, and the terrifying energy rippled through every inch of the square. The ancient blue bricks on the ground of the square, which had stood for countless years, all burst open, and the white bones on the ground were lifted into the air. The power of one blade was so powerful that it was terrifying to the extreme. Although the ancient corpse general had no consciousness, it instinctively turned into a phantom and quickly retreated. At the same time, it used its fingers like a sword and shot out rays of bright sword energy to meet the blade light. Rumble! The blade energy and sword energy fiercely collided in the air, bursting out dazzling lights as if several lightning bolts were crossing the sky. The horrifying blade energy and sword energy intertwined in the air, forming a dense shadow of the blade energy and sword energy. The two immortal cultivator bodies had unparalleled combat prowess. The blazing saber light and the unparalleled sword chi in the air wreaked havoc everywhere. The ancient limestone ground below quickly melted. Dust flew up and drifted down like dust. The ancient corpse soldiers near the battlefield were also blown away by the storm of energy that had burst out like raging waves. Fortunately, the old tortoise's avatar deliberately blocked the surging power. Otherwise, Gu Fei and the others would also be swept away. In the end, the ancient corpse general controlled by the old tortoise's soul-splitting technique gained the upper hand. After all, this indestructible body was equivalent to the old tortoise's avatar. It had the same intelligence and soul fluctuations as the old tortoise. The old tortoise's avatar was a notch stronger than the soulless corpse that only knew how to fight based on instinct. The ancient corpse general was forced to retreat after clashing with the old tortoise's avatar dozens of times. At this time, the ancient corpse soldiers with spears and iron swords had already approached from all directions. They mercilessly raised their rusty spears and dull ancient swords toward Gu Fei and the others. Chapter 183. Looking at the approaching ancient corpse soldiers, everyone's faces were ashen, but the old turtle remained calm. Whoosh! After forcing back the ancient corpse general's avatar, it suddenly turned around and strode back. A dazzling saber light burst out from its hand as if it wanted to tear the void. With a wave of its hand, an unparalleled saber energy suddenly rushed out and swept toward the ancient corpse soldiers that were coming from all directions. Without any suspense, all the ancient corpse soldiers that were swept by the saber energy were blown away by the unparalleled saber energy. There was no saber in its hand, but it was better than having one. The old turtle seemed to have picked up a treasure. His avatar was extremely tyrannical. Swoosh! The ancient corpse general that was forced to retreat rushed out from the gray mist again and directly approached Gu Fei's group. Each step was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, and each step forward caused the entire ground to shake. The long sword shattered the sky. The terrifying ancient corpse general unleashed an unparalleled sword energy toward the old turtle's avatar that was also an ancient corpse general. With its disheveled hair fluttering in the wind, the old turtle's avatar raised its long saber to the sky and moved forward. The saber energy seemed to be able to pierce through the heaven and earth and instantly shattered the terrifying sword energy. It then took a step forward, causing the earth to tremble. The entire ground shook violently, and the bricks under its feet collapsed and then exploded in the air. The momentum of the old turtle's avatar had risen to the extreme. It waved its hand again and unleashed another saber attack. This time, the power of the saber energy was vast and unparalleled. Wherever the saber energy went, the world seemed to be torn apart, and the void was shattered, emitting a dazzling light. The powerful saber slashed down from the sky and shattered the endless sword energies unleashed by the ancient corpse general. The extremely ferocious saber energy directly sent the ancient corpse general flying. Bang! The ancient corpse general that was sent flying flew backward for more than 100 zhang and directly hit the giant cauldron in the center of the square. The giant cauldron suddenly trembled violently. In the next moment, the giant cauldron emitted an extremely powerful and terrifying fluctuation. The ancient corpse general was once again sent flying by the terrifying power that erupted from the giant cauldron. Then, a scene that left everyone dumbfounded happened. The countless strange beasts carved on the cauldron seemed to have come to life at this moment. They rushed out from the ancient cauldron, and ferocious phantoms lingered around the ancient cauldron. The old turtle's avatar was killing in all directions. For the time being, there was nothing nearby that could pose a threat to the group. Although the repelled ancient corpse soldiers rushed toward Gu Fei's group again, they were still far away from Gu Fei's group and could not stop them from advancing. The distance of 100 zhang was covered in the blink of an eye. The old turtle anxiously controlled the avatar and directly rushed toward the giant cauldron. The right hand of the old turtle's avatar pressed forward, and the vast yuan qi condensed into a huge palm of light that directly grabbed the giant cauldron. The old turtle wanted to directly take away the giant cauldron, but it miscalculated. The shadows that rushed out from the body of the ancient cauldron seemed to feel threatened. They all soared into the sky and rushed toward the giant hand that was descending from the sky. Boom! The countless shadows that rushed out from the giant cauldron instantly collided with the palm of light that shrouded down and burst out a dull, thunderous sound. The surging power shook the heaven and earth, and the dazzling light illuminated the entire square. The countless shadows actually shattered the giant hand that was descending from the sky. The huge burst of air caused a tornado to blow in the air. A great pressure shrouded all directions, and the mighty aftermath caused the entire square to tremble. Everyone was shocked and quickly retreated. Everyone who saw this scene was extremely shocked. Although the shadows that rushed out from the body of the giant cauldron seemed tangible and intangible, they did not seem to be illusory existences. A desolate and simple divine sense circled around the cauldron. It was clearly formed by the origin embryos of ancient strange beasts, and they were extremely fierce. My goodness, it is indeed worthy of being one of the rare ancient treasures. It can actually defend itself without anyone controlling it. This is really surprising. The old turtle saw this and looked at the giant cauldron with even more ferocious eyes. Although these ancient strange beasts had lost their physical bodies and their primordial spirits were transformed by the cauldron, they did not have much intelligence. However, after being nourished by the spirit power of the cauldron, their strength became a bit more powerful than when they were alive. Just when everyone was in a state of extreme shock, the ancient corpse general that was blown away once again closed in on them. Like the ancient corpse soldiers, this corpse general also had an indestructible body. It could only be completely destroyed by a special method. Stop him! The old turtle directly ordered the ancient corpse general clone. The ancient corpse general that had become the old turtle's external incarnation immediately disappeared and directly appeared in front of the ancient corpse general that was closing in on the crowd. Old turtle, hurry up and break the formation! Why are you still dilly-dallying? Gu Fei felt a headache coming on as he looked at the countless ancient corpse soldiers closing in from all directions. Humph! The old turtle sneered and did not answer. Instead, he threw the stone turtle shell in his hand into the air and directly sat down. When the stone turtle shell flew up from the old turtle's hand, it quickly grew in size. When it flew above the giant cauldron, the stone turtle shell had already become the size of a small mountain. What is this old turtle trying to do? Everyone's hearts were filled with questions, but under such circumstances, even Gu Fei was not in a position to ask. He could only watch the old tortoise's actions. The old turtle muttered something and pointed at the stone turtle shell that was floating above the giant cauldron. A ball of light the size of a fist immediately shot out from the old turtle's fingertip and shot toward the stone turtle shell. The ball of light shot into the stone tortoise shell and silently sank into it. Then, the entire stone tortoise shell began to tremble. In the next moment, a hazy space appeared from the stone turtle shell. A strange fluctuation came down from the space inside the stone turtle shell and shrouded the giant cauldron below. Rumble. Just when the strange fluctuation shrouded the giant cauldron, a muffled thunderous sound came from the giant cauldron. Then, the entire giant cauldron shook violently. The countless rare birds and strange beasts on the body of the cauldron suddenly emitted endless light. Strange beasts that seemed to have come from ancient times emerged from the body of the giant cauldron. A ferocious tiger with a single horn and a pair of wings on its back roared at the sky, its voice shaking the vast sky. The immortal phoenix let out a long cry to the 9 heavens. There was also an unknown fierce beast that bared its fangs and brandished its claws as if it wanted to devour someone. The countless strange beast souls on the giant cauldron were awakened at this moment. Each of the beast's souls emitted a terrifying fluctuation of power that completely blocked the mighty power from the sky. The mighty power from the stone turtle shell could not shake the giant cauldron. On the other side, the old turtle's corpse general avatar had already begun fighting against an opponent that was also an ancient corpse general. The battle between the two martial artists had begun fiercely. For a time, a gust of wind blew in the square, rolling up thousands of bones on the ground and scattering them in all directions. Chi rays shot everywhere and violent energy flows filled every inch of space. Outrageous! I don't believe that I can't subdue you. The old turtle could not help but become angry when he saw that the power of his pseudo-world could not absorb the giant cauldron into the pseudo-world. He desperately drove the stone turtle shell suspended above the giant cauldron to suppress the giant cauldron below. At the same time, he guided the power of heaven and earth out of the pseudo-world and wrapped it around the giant cauldron. Under the old turtle's full force, the countless strange beast souls around the giant cauldron suddenly showed signs of being suppressed back into the cauldron. The giant cauldron was gradually pulled off the ground by a huge force. After all, the mountain and river giant cauldron was only an automatic defense. Without anyone controlling it, the power displayed by the mountain and river giant cauldron was actually just the tip of the iceberg. Otherwise, even when the old turtle was at his peak, he would not have been able to absorb the mountain and river giant cauldron into his pseudo-world. The moment the mountain and river giant cauldron left the ground, the countless ancient corpse soldiers that were pressing towards the crowd all fell to the ground, and no longer made any sound. Ha! Gu Fei and the others could not help but be stunned. After a short pause in their thoughts, everyone could not help but be overjoyed. The old turtle was right. The giant cauldron was indeed the key. The ancient corpse general that was fighting endlessly with the old turtle's corpse general doppelganger was also blown away by the corpse general doppelganger's punch, and could no longer get up. After the mountain and river giant cauldron left the ground, the ancient corpse soldiers and the ancient corpse general lost their power. The mysterious force that controlled these monsters seemed to have disappeared. However, the mountain and river giant cauldron seemed to be unwilling to be taken away by the old turtle's pseudo-world. Countless beast souls struggled and roared on the body of the cauldron, emitting bursts of powerful energy fluctuations. Bang! The mountain and river giant cauldron that had left the ground fell back to the ground, and everyone immediately felt a tremor coming from the ground. The moment the mountain and river giant cauldron fell to the ground, the ancient corpse soldiers that had fallen to the ground were once again shrouded by a mysterious force and crawled up from the ground. Whoosh! The ancient corpse general immediately rose from the ground and launched an attack on the corpse general doppelganger. With a wave of its hand, rays of dazzling sword chi surged out and attacked the corpse general doppelganger. Hiss! Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was truly too strange. Old Turtle, put in more effort! When Du Fei saw the giant cauldron falling, his entire heart seemed to have fallen into a bottomless abyss. He could not wait to rush over and lift the giant cauldron off the ground. Fight! The old turtle suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood essence toward the stone turtle shell that was pressing down from the sky. The blood essence seeped into the stone turtle shell, and the next moment, the blood essence seemed to have stimulated the terrifying power of the stone turtle shell. After spitting out that mouthful of blood essence, the old turtle's expression immediately became weary. Using blood essence as a guide to guide an even more powerful and terrifying power was a secret technique mastered by the old turtle. This secret technique also caused great damage to the body. Rumble! The huge stone turtle shell emitted a monstrous wave of energy fluctuation. Then, the power of heaven and earth in the pseudo-world became many times stronger. The powerful beast souls that rushed out from the mountain and river giant cauldron were suddenly suppressed into the body of the cauldron. Then, the mountain and river giant cauldron, which was shrouded by the pseudo-world power, was once again pulled off the ground. The ancient corpse soldiers that were approaching Gu Fei and the others fell to the ground again. The ancient corpse general was also blasted away and could no longer climb up. Chapter 184. Under the veil of night, the mist was hazy, and a scene that caused everyone to be astounded was occurring on the square at the center of primeval vicious city. An enormous cauldron that was around 20 m tall and 15 m wide was being sucked up into the air by an unfathomable force that mightily descended from the sky. Amid the rumbling, heaven and earth shook. The entire square, and even the entire city, were shaking. It was a gigantic cauldron that seemed to have existed since the beginning of time, as if it had existed since the beginning of the world. A terrifying energy fluctuation was released from it, and the souls of countless ancient beasts were roaring on the cauldron. Unfortunately, the pseudo-power of heaven and earth from the stone turtle shell floating above the mountain and river cauldron was too strong. The mountain and river cauldron shook violently, trying to shake off the suction force from the pseudo-world, but it was all in vain. The mountain and river cauldron, a rare treasure of the primordial era, had a great origin. Unfortunately, no one was controlling it, so its power was limited. Unable to resist the suction of the old turtle pseudo-world, it was slowly moving toward the hazy space. The stone turtle shell floating over the huge cauldron had already grown to the size of a mountain. After the old turtle sprayed a mouthful of blood essence onto the stone turtle shell, it immediately burst forth with dazzling light. The power of heaven and earth pouring down from the pseudo-heaven and earth inside the cauldron suddenly increased. Beams of divine light tore through heaven and earth and blocked the power of the pseudo-realm in the void heaven realm. The old turtle didn't hesitate to damage its own blood essence and primordial chi to get the mountain and river cauldron. The pseudo-world's power turned the void around the mountain and river cauldron into a separate world, independent of the ruined heaven realm, completely cutting off all connections between the primordial fierce city and the mountain and river cauldron. The ancient corpse soldiers and ancient corpse generals guarding the fierce city seemed to have lost all their strength in an instant. They were completely turned into lifeless objects, and fell on the square covered with white bones. The strength of the ancient corpse soldiers and ancient corpse generals was unquestionable. If it weren't for the abnormal old turtle, they would have been killed by these monsters many times over. It seemed that the power controlling these corpse soldiers and ancient corpse generals came from the mountain and river cauldron. Once the mountain and river cauldron left the ground, even if the ancient corpse soldiers and ancient corpse generals were still alive, they would completely lose the ability to move. Everyone's crisis was temporarily resolved. However, if the old tortoise could not successfully take the treasured cauldron of mountains and rivers with the power of the fake world, everything would return to normal. Therefore, everyone hoped that old tortoise could successfully obtain the mountain and river cauldron. They were even more nervous than old tortoise. Controlling a heavenly abode, this dragon turtle. Dan Chinzi looked at the hazy space inside the stone turtle shell and was shocked to the extreme. Legend has it that the ancient almighty beings were able to create their own heavenly abode. Who would have thought that it was actually true? After all, Dan Chinzi was a cultivator of the older generation. He was experienced and knowledgeable. At this moment, he had already vaguely guessed what kind of existence the space within the stone tortoise shell was. Could this dragon turtle really be one of the 9 sons of the ancient true dragon? Dan Chinzi was seriously suspicious of this old turtle's identity. After all, someone who could control a heavenly abode was definitely not simple. Even demigods and supreme saints did not have the ability to split the heavens and split the earth. Perhaps only a true immortal god would have the supreme power to create chaos and reopen the heavens and earth. The huge mountain and river cauldron slowly rose. The old turtle's fake world power seemed to have the upper hand as it slowly pulled the mountain and river cauldron into the fake world inside the stone tortoise shell. Everyone watched this scene anxiously. Old Tortoise, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, was sweating profusely. He seemed to be extremely strenuous, and his eyes were almost popping out of their sockets. The sparkling dragon whiskers hanging in front of his chest were trembling continuously. Swoosh! Old Tortoise's corpse general avatar appeared beside him to protect him. It was a mighty black-haired middle-aged man. He was 9 feet tall and emitted an extremely powerful aura. He raised his head and his gray eyes were no longer lifeless. Instead, they were filled with vigor. Old Tortoise's avatar had complete control of the indestructible warrior body. The avatar withdrew his gaze and sat cross-legged behind Old Tortoise. He stretched out his right palm and pressed it on Old Tortoise's back. A vast amount of yuan qi began to surge toward Old Tortoise. Roar! With external help, Old Tortoise immediately roared at the sky. His entire body seemed to have been injected with endless power and became vigorous. A powerful aura emanated from Old Tortoise's body. The surging power made the crystal white bones that were scattered around float up. They then revolved violently around Old Tortoise, who looked like a peerless old demon. Divide the chaos, split the heavens and earth, swallow the universe! Old Tortoise shouted. With the help of the terrifying power transmitted by the Avatar, he performed a secret technique and shot rays of dazzling divine light at the huge stone tortoise shell floating in the sky. Rumble! The hazy space inside the stone tortoise shell started to become clearer as it trembled violently. The endless power of the pseudo-realm poured down and formed a huge funnel-shaped whirlpool below. The strong suction force instantly enveloped the mountain and river cauldron below. The speed of the mountain and river cauldron's ascent suddenly increased. It was no longer slow. At the same time, the stone tortoise shell also descended from the sky. The fake world inside expanded and shrouded the mountain and river cauldron. It really had the momentum to swallow the universe. It seemed that the mountain and river cauldron could not escape the fate of being absorbed into Old Tortoise's pseudo-world. However, at the moment when the mountain and river cauldron was about to be devoured by the pseudo-world, an accident occurred. Boom! Like a flash flood, or like the Milky Way pouring down from the 9 heavens, the cauldron of mountain and river seemed to have sensed danger, and suddenly released a surge of power, a terrifying power that could shake the heavens and the earth. Then, under everyone's shocked stares, the rising cauldron of mountain and river stopped. In the next moment, the souls of countless beasts rushed out of the cauldron like wild horses. Not only that, but a hazy world actually appeared around the mountain and river cauldron. Within the hazy image, the top was clear and the bottom was turbid, just like the real world. Above, there were countless suns, moons, and stars, as well as the weather of wind and rain. Below, there were mountains, rivers, and seas. Then, a fist-sized ball of light slowly rose from the mountain and river cauldron. The illusory world began to revolve around this ball of light. The suns, moons, stars, the heavens, the earth, the mountains, and the rivers continuously appeared around the ball of light, and even everything in the world. Tens of thousands of beast souls rushed into the hazy world at the same time. Then, the beasts seemed to be reborn in an instant, and their faint figures became incomparably real. The aura emitted by each of the beasts became even more powerful. The huge barbaric dragon's figure appeared in that world. It raised its head to the sky and let out a long roar. The terrifying sound waves scattered the clouds in the sky and spread out from that hazy world. The sound was deafening. However, the hazy world projected by the ball of light seemed to be extremely unstable and constantly changing. The mountains, the sun, the moon, the stars, and even everything in the world gradually disappeared, returning to the primal chaos. After a while, the mountains, rivers, and the endless starry sky reappeared. This magical ball of light interchanged between the primal chaos and the universe, as if it was showing everyone the formation of the primal chaos and the universe. Roar! It's the innate chaotic nascent embryo! When the old tortoise saw the ball of light rising from the mountain and river cauldron, it could no longer keep calm and roared in excitement. Gu Fei had no idea what the chaotic embryo was. Not only Gu Fei, but everyone present also did not know what the magical ball of light that could transform the primal chaos and the universe was. But without a doubt, the ball of light rising from the mountain and river cauldron was definitely an extraordinary treasure. Otherwise, the old tortoise would not be so excited and nervous. As soon as the chaotic origin fetus appeared, it manifested a projection of a real world and emitted a strange energy wave. The wave did not appear to be very powerful, but it managed to freeze the stone turtle shell that was descending from Old Tortoise in the air. At the same time, Gu Fei felt his hand shake, and the long sword condensed by the essence of the magic weapon flew out of his hand. It turned into a purple sword light and rushed into the chaotic embryo. Gu Fei could not help but be shocked. The moment the sword light rushed into the chaotic embryo, he could no longer sense the existence of the sword soul. The faintly discernible connection between him and the sword soul had been completely severed. What's going on? Gu Fei was stunned. He could not believe that he had lost his greatest support in such an inexplicable manner. The funnel-shaped vortex formed by the fake world could no longer pull the mountain and river cauldron. Not only that, but the mountain and river cauldron actually began to slowly fall. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help turning pale with fright. They knew that when the mountain and river cauldron fell to the ground, the powerless ancient corpse soldiers would stand up once more. When that happened, everyone would most likely die without a burial site. How dare you! The old tortoise roared again and again. The corpse behind him desperately guided a vast amount of yuan qi into his body. Boom! With a loud explosion, a monstrous wave of energy rippled out of the old tortoise's body. The white bones around him all exploded into powder and scattered on the ground. Beams of strong light shot out of the old tortoise's body. The space where he was located, under the cover of his fake world, became a world of its own. Inside, the old tortoise's power was not limited by the ruined sky realm and could grow infinitely. All kinds of great restrictive spells were formed in the old tortoise's hands and swept toward the mysterious light ball in the sky with a vast power. The old tortoise wanted to imprison the light ball. However, when the various restrictive spells that were powerful enough to shake a world rushed into the hazy world outside the light ball, they were all absorbed by the hazy world like clay oxen entering the sea. Hiss! The old tortoise sucked in a breath of cold air. This chaotic embryo seemed to be able to absorb everything in the world, which made it extremely tricky to deal with. Rumble! Like 100,000 mountains slowly pressing down from the sky, the mountain and river cauldron's falling momentum seemed to be irreversible. Chapter 185. The innate chaotic embryo that rushed out of the mountain and river cauldron instantly reversed the situation. The power of the chaotic embryo was enough to contend against the old turtle's pseudo-world. The mysterious power emanating from the chaotic embryo stopped the falling stone turtle shell and caused the mountain and river cauldron to fall back to the ground. Seeing this, everyone's expression changed dramatically. The mere thought of the terrible consequences of the mountain and river cauldron falling back to the ground sent chills down their spines. At this time, the old turtle was extremely anxious. He made up his mind and spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood essence in succession. The blood did not spill to the ground, but turned into 3 clouds of blood mist in the air that swirled around the old turtle. Obviously, the old turtle was using a secret technique. The 3 clouds of blood mist around him burst into a dazzling blood-red light that illuminated the entire sky. 3 blood-red divine dragons, each more than 100 feet long, quickly condensed in the air. They were not in the form of a dragon turtle, nor were they real divine dragons with flesh and blood. Instead, they were divine dragons formed by a cloud of blood mist and light. Seeing this, Dan Chinzi had vaguely guessed that this dragon turtle was very likely one of the 9 sons of the dragon. The old turtle's blood essence contained the aura of the true dragon. The 3 blood dragons emitted a bright blood-red brilliance, which was particularly dazzling in the dark night. A heavy sense of oppression emanated from the blood dragons, and the great pressure made everyone pale. A dragon roar suddenly came from the old turtle's mouth. The 3 blood dragons also threw their heads back and roared. The tremendous dragon roar shook the heavens, and the aura of the true dragon surged mightily between heaven and earth. Even the spirits of the primitive beasts that rushed out of the mountain and river cauldron trembled in fear under the dragon roar, somewhat afraid of the aura of the true dragon emitted by the 3 blood dragons. The powerful aura of the true dragon spread in all directions, and all beasts were frightened. The blood-red true dragon was condensed from the drops of true dragon essence that the old turtle had desperately spat out. Very similar to the doppelganger disintegration technique, it consumed the old turtle's vitality. The old turtle's originally incomparably powerful vitality had been worn away by the formation in the stone forest for countless years, and there was no vitality left in its body. Otherwise, the dragon turtle, a mighty expert of the antiquity times and a headache for the master of the ruined heaven realm, would not have been so weak. Now that it was using its life essence again, it was practically asking for the old tortoise's life. Its heart was bleeding. However, for the cauldron of mountain and river, it was definitely worth it. Roar! The dragon roars shook the heavens and the earth. The enormous roars were like raging waves beating against the shore, and also like thunder from the 9 heavens. They resounded in the heavens and the earth, and the entire primeval vicious city seemed to tremble. Although there were only 3 blood dragons and they weren't real divine dragons, the sight of them roaring at the same time was even more majestic than a magnificent army. The huge sound wave caused everyone's chi and blood to surge. Those with weaker cultivation even lost their balance and fell to the ground. Everyone was shocked. 3 blood dragons that were over 100 feet long, emanating a blood-red light that looked like waves of blood, let out roars and transformed into 3 blood-red dragon shadows, swooping towards the chaos origin embryo in the sky. Enveloped by the power of heaven and earth emitted by the old turtle's pseudo-heaven and earth, the old turtle's cultivation was not restricted at all. The 3 blood dragons formed by the 3 mouthfuls of essence blood emitted a terrifying energy fluctuation. The blood dragons directly broke through the hazy yet real-world projection that lingered around the chaos origin embryo, and with the momentum of 3 dragons fighting for a pearl, they swooped towards the chaos origin embryo above the mountain and river cauldron. At this moment, no one noticed that in the sky above the square, streaks of black and white light were converging, and a huge yin-yang diagram that covered the entire sky above the square was emerging. The yin and yang chi of this part of the world was disturbed. The moment when the chaos origin embryo was about to be devoured by the 3 blood dragons, a giant claw the size of a mountain and covered in green scales suddenly reached out from the hazy world and slapped at the 3 blood dragons. Pun! 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 After 3 loud sounds, the 3 blood dragons were directly smashed by the giant claw, and blood rained down from the sky. Ah! The old tortoise, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. The 3 blood dragons were smashed by the giant claw, and the old tortoise suffered a great blow. Even the corpse general doppelganger had blood seeping out of the corner of its mouth. The corpse general doppelganger's right palm was still pressed against the old tortoise's back, and streams of primordial chi continuously flowed into the old tortoise's body. The power of the corpse general doppelganger seemed to be endless. After the giant claw smashed the 3 blood dragons, it once again retreated into the world projected by the chaos origin embryo. Indistinctly, the silhouettes of ancient dragons could be vaguely seen in that hazy world. Not only the ancient dragons, but the silhouettes of other primitive beasts also appeared in the world projected by the chaos origin embryo. The hazy world seemed to be a miniature version of the real world. The sun, moon, stars, lakes, seas, mountains, rivers, wind, thunder, and rain all appeared on the chaos origin embryo. Everything in the world seemed to be in the chaos origin embryo. However, in the next moment, the chaos origin embryo would return to its chaotic state. The mountain and river cauldron actually contains the soul of an expert of my clan. The old tortoise was very surprised. The giant claw that was covered in green scales earlier was not a real claw made of flesh and blood, but an illusion formed by a spirit. However, the old tortoise sensed the aura of the true dragon chi from the giant claw. In other words, the giant claw belonged to an expert of the dragon clan. Rumble! Heaven and earth shook violently as the mountain and river cauldrons slowly pressed down from the sky. The void around the mountain and river cauldrons seemed to be on the verge of collapsing as ripples spread out. Damn it, if only I was at my peak! The old tortoise was filled with hatred and regret. The chaos origin embryo was something that the mountain and river cauldron had continuously gathered the chi of lakes, seas, mountains, and rivers over the years to form. This was something that the old tortoise could not have imagined. If the old tortoise could obtain the chaos origin embryo, his pseudo-world would one day grow into a real world, a truly perfect world without any flaws. When everyone saw this scene, they could not help but feel despair. The old tortoise seemed to be powerless to stop the fall of the mountain and river cauldron. The pseudo-world inside the stone tortoise shell was powerful enough to stop the mountain and river cauldron from falling. The chaos origin embryo also seemed to be a world of its own. The two were existences of the same level, so the old tortoise's pseudo-world could not do anything to the chaos origin embryo. At this moment, Gu Fei suddenly looked up into the sky, and his expression suddenly became a little strange. Everyone followed his gaze, and then, everyone was stunned. Above the square, there was an overwhelming yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram that covered all directions, slowly rotating. The yin and yang diagram in the sky was no stranger to the disciples of the Taishan sect. On a night a year ago, the demon lord of six paths had attacked. At that time, the yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram had shown great power. Not only had it broken the protective array of the Taishan sect, but it had also indirectly let the demon lord of six paths go. It could be said that after experiencing what happened that night, no one could easily forget the situation of the night when the demon lord attacked. And now, this mysterious yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram had appeared again. How could the disciples of the Taishan sect not be shocked? What's going on? How did this thing appear here? Dan Chenzi was shocked. However, no one could answer his question. Because no one knew the origin of the yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram. Of course, among the crowd, the person who was most shocked was Gu Fei. The yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram did not seem to rush out of his chest. How did it appear in the sky? After the yin and yang jade pendant merged into Gu Fei's chest, this time, without any warning, it ran out on its own and shrouded the stone tortoise shell floating in the sky and the mountain and river cauldron that was falling. This made Gu Fei inexplicably shocked. The yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram silently rotated in the sky, and the fluctuations of the yin and yang qi that it emitted surged like stormy waves, and then directly shrouded from the sky. The huge yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram covered the sky above the square, and the endless yin and yang qi began to surge toward the stone tortoise shell and the mountain and river cauldron. At this moment, the entire archaic vicious city was truly trembling, as if the end of the world had arrived. The power of the yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang made the world tremble. The vast and incomparable yin and yang qi made the world lose its color, and the terrible power sealed the world. The stone tortoise shell floating above the mountain and river cauldron trembled violently, and there were signs of it being sucked in by the yin and yang diagram. This thing again! The old turtle could not help but curse, and then quickly called the stone tortoise shell back. The huge stone tortoise shell quickly shrank and flew into the old turtle's hand. The old turtle had seen the power of the yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram of the yin and yang diagram. It was a ruthless character that had completely absorbed the power of an archaic great array. The old turtle was not arrogant enough to think that he could compete with this mysterious yin and yang diagram. The clone corpse continued to guide Yuan Qi into the old turtle's body, and the huge Yuan Qi temporarily suppressed the old turtle's internal injuries. The yin and yang diagram in the eye of the stone forest formation had absorbed an unknown amount of Yuan Qi. This yin and yang diagram was much more powerful than it had been a year ago. It directly sealed the sky and the earth, completely sealing off the entire square. Then, it slowly enveloped the area in an attempt to devour the chaotic embryo. The chaotic embryo seemed to be somewhat afraid of the yin and yang diagram, and the hazy world surrounding it was immediately absorbed by the yin and yang diagram. The chaotic embryo seemed to have a mind of its own. It struggled left and right under the yin and yang diagram's blockade, trying to break through the divine diagram's blockade. At the same time, the mountain and river cauldron emitted a brilliant light and shook violently. Phantoms of ancient beasts rushed out of the cauldron, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws at the yin and yang diagram. The souls of the ancient beasts were incomparably powerful, and their roars were deafening. However, in the face of absolute power, their struggles were powerless. The phantoms of the ancient beasts had already been annihilated by the yin and yang qi descending from the diagram before they could even reach the yin and yang diagram. Chapter 186. The beast souls on the mountain and river cauldron were indestructible. Although they had been imprisoned on the cauldron for countless years, they had also been nourished by the mountain and river cauldron's essence from all directions. Thus, they had long become one. Unless the mountain and river cauldron was destroyed, the beast souls on the cauldron would never be destroyed. The Tai Chi Yin and Yang diagram enveloped the world, releasing energy waves as vast as the sea and as heavy as the mountains. The space seemed to have collapsed, and space cracks that looked like black lightning flashed in the void. The space cracks were filled with the aura of destruction. Anything that was touched by them would turn into the most primitive matter and dissipate between heaven and earth. The mountain and river cauldron, which was enveloped by the yin and yang qi of the Tai Chi yin and yang diagram, shook violently and buzzed. Even the space cracks couldn't destroy this primeval treasure. The spirits of the strange beasts that were annihilated by the yin and yang qi dissipated into the yin and yang qi. In the next moment, they reappeared on the body of the cauldron, and then rushed out from the body of the cauldron. Although the Tai Chi yin and yang diagram stopped the mountain and river cauldron in the air, thousands of beast souls rushed out of the cauldron and circled around it. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws, and their roars shook the world. The Tai Chi yin and yang diagram couldn't completely suppress the mountain and river cauldron for a while. Everyone was shaken by the sound waves, and their blood surged. Their faces turned pale, and they all retreated, unable to stand still. Only when they reached the edge of the square did they stop feeling so uncomfortable. Only the old turtle and his corpse general doppelganger were still nearby, eyeing the chaotic embryo in the sky, which was trying to break out of the Tai Chi yin and yang diagram. However, the two treasures were still fighting fiercely. The pressure from the collision was earth-shattering, and an energy storm blew around them. The old turtle was also affected, so he had to release the stone turtle shell and let it hover above his head. The power of the fake world surged out and covered the old turtle and his corpse general doppelganger. The old turtle stared at the chaotic embryo with bright eyes. The embryo would occasionally create a virtual image of a world, and from time to time, it would replay the primeval chaos. However, no matter how strong the energy fluctuation from the chaotic embryo was, it couldn't break out of the terrifying domain created by the Tai Chi yin and yang diagram. At the same time, the Tai Chi yin yang diagram was unable to devour the chaotic origin embryo and the mountain and river cauldron into the diagram. The two treasures seemed to be in a stalemate. However, in the eyes of the crowd, the mysterious godly diagram seemed to have gained the upper hand and was completely on the offensive. On the other hand, the chaotic origin embryo and the mountain and river cauldron were on the defensive. The entire primordial vicious city was shaking at this moment. The power that erupted from the violent clash of the two treasures was so great that even the ruined heaven realm could not suppress it. The ominous city was trembling, and the world seemed to be trembling as well. The layer of gray mist above the ominous city had long been dispersed, revealing the stars in the sky. Those countless stars didn't seem to be far from the ground. The starlight that shone down seemed to be different from that of the outside world. However, no one could tell what the difference was. Gu Fei had already learned from the old turtle that the so-called ruined heaven realm was nothing more than a false realm created by an almighty expert in ancient times to recreate the chaos. It was not a real heaven and earth. Although Gu Fei felt that something was strange, he couldn't say what it was. A perfect major world was not like this. Although there were all kinds of things in this world, including the sun, the moon, and the stars, on a cliff dozens of kilometers away from the primordial vicious city stood a group of people who were looking up at the primordial vicious city in astonishment. The person in the lead was a middle-aged Taoist wearing a blue Taoist robe and carrying a sword on his back. "What's that?" The middle-aged Taoist looked at the slowly revolving Taiji yin-yang diagram in the sky above the primordial vicious city and murmured. There was an unconcealable shock on his face. The middle-aged Taoist was Lu Ruhai, a sword cultivator from the Guanxing immortal sect who had refused to help and circled the city. Behind Lu Ruhai stood 5 young men in white robes. The people of the Guanxing immortal sect and the Shangqing sect had circled around the primordial vicious city. Under Lu Ruhai's lead, the disciples of the Guanxing immortal sect had circled around the primordial vicious city and arrived at the cliff. Even Lu Ruhai had never seen the Taiji yin-yang diagram before. However, he believed that it was a Taoist divine treasure and an unparalleled Dharma artifact. Humph! No wonder Dan Qinzi was willing to take the risk to enter the primordial vicious city. He must be jealous of this divine treasure. Lu Ruhai naturally thought that Dan Qinzi entered the primordial vicious city for the Taiji yin-yang diagram. However, he was wrong. Although Dan Qinzi entered the primordial vicious city to obtain the divine treasure, it wasn't for the Taiji yin-yang diagram. Whoosh! The Taiji yin-yang diagram in the sky above the primordial vicious city spun slowly. The vast power of yin and yang caused the sky in front of Lu Ruhai to shake. Even though he was dozens of meters away, he was still extremely shocked. The terrifying vibration emitted by the divine diagram made everyone's heart palpitate. It was a shudder that originated from the soul. It filled everyone with fear and made them feel as insignificant as ants in front of it. Let's go! Lu Ruhai stared at the divine diagram in the sky, turned around, and walked down the cliff. If Lu Ruhai said that he wasn't jealous of the divine diagram, he wouldn't believe it either. However, if he had to choose between entering the primordial vicious city and continuing to Heaven Burial Valley to pick the 9-colored immortal herb, Lu Ruhai would still choose the latter. After all, the primordial vicious city was too dangerous. Although the trip to Heaven Burial Valley was equally dangerous, there was still a chance of success. Entering the primordial vicious city, on the other hand, was a hopeless situation. At least, that was what Lu Ruhai thought. Otherwise, the divine treasures in the city would have been taken away by countless Taoist experts who had entered the ruined sky realm over the past thousands of years. Lu Ruhai headed east with Ren Wuming, Lu Yinhe, and the other 4 disciples. Soon, their figures disappeared into the dense forest at the bottom of the cliff. On another relatively open slope, the people from the High Clarity sect also sensed the strange vibration coming from the primordial vicious city. Ding Yangzi and the others also saw the Taiji yin-yang diagram in the sky above the ancient city. Dan Qinzi, that guy! When Ding Yangzi saw the yin-yang diagram in the sky above the primordial vicious city, his eyes could not help but burn with passion. Ding Yangzi was shocked. He also thought that it was an incredible divine treasure. If Dan Qinzi obtained it, then the balance of power among the 3 great path sects would be completely broken, and the Taishan sect would become the leader of the 3 great path sects. This was something that the Guanxing Immortal sect and the High Clarity sect did not want to see. After all, no one wanted either of the other 2 forces to be superior to the Ling family. However, Ding Yangzi was not a fool. He could already tell that Ding Yangzi must have encountered great trouble in the primordial vicious city. Divine treasures were not that easy to obtain. If he was not careful, he might pay with his life. Ding Yangzi also did not want to enter the primordial vicious city that was full of unknown dangers to fight for some divine treasure. After all, a divine treasure could only be enjoyed if one was alive. Ding Yangzi made the same decision as Lu Ruhai. He continued to lead a group of disciples east to Heaven Burial Valley to obtain the longevity grass. If he could make such a great contribution, perhaps the patriarch of the sect would grant him a longevity grass. The longevity grass could increase a cultivator's lifespan by 200 years. If he could take it, 200 years would be enough for his cultivation to break through the bottleneck of the 9th heaven of the transcending mortality realm. Thinking of this, Ding Yangzi could not wait to go to Heaven Burial Valley, collect the longevity grass, and then leave the ruined sky realm. The ruined sky realm was full of danger. It was definitely not a good place. The figures of Ding Yangzi and the others also disappeared into the eastern woodland. In addition to Ding Yangzi's and Lu Ruhai's groups, some mysterious figures also appeared outside the primordial vicious city. They were the green-robed disciples of the 3 great path sects who had entered the ruined sky realm first. Some of these people were even more powerful than Ding Yangzi and Lu Ruhai. They were the terrifying cultivators who had 1 foot in the void-controlling realm. Although some of these people already had 1 foot in the void-controlling realm, seeing that their lifespans were coming to an end, they had no choice but to take the risk and enter the ruined sky realm for a slim chance of survival. Therefore, these people cherished their lives even more, and were absolutely unwilling to take risks. Some of these people were watching, and some had directly retreated, but no one dared to step into the primordial vicious city. No one was unafraid of death, especially these cultivators who pursued immortality and lived much longer than ordinary people. At this time, every inch of space on the central square of the vicious city was filled with vast power. Gu Fei and the others were forced to retreat again and again, and had long since retreated to the street outside the square. The mountain and river cauldron had been completely suppressed, and the chaotic origin embryo that had been struggling here and there also showed signs of being suppressed back into the mountain and river cauldron. The mountain and river cauldron shook repeatedly, and the souls of the desolate beasts that had rushed out of the cauldron hissed in unison. The vast and terrifying soul power that surged out toward the heavens and split the earth, turning the space around the mountain and river cauldron into a dead zone. The power of the world that surged out of the chaotic origin embryo was also doing its best to resist the yin and yang qi that surged down from the sky. The thousands of yin and yang qi that descended from the sky were continuously dispersed by the chaotic origin embryo. The entire primordial vicious city shook, and cracks began to appear on the ground. Outside the square, there was a continuous rumble of buildings collapsing. The old turtle was like a pillar that stood firm in the middle of the terrifying energy storm. He still did not retreat, and the stone turtle shell that hung above his head emitted a vast amount of pseudo-worldly power that enveloped the old turtle and his avatar. Although there was a terrifying energy storm in all directions, the enormous power also impacted the stone turtle shell greatly and caused it to tremble repeatedly. However, he didn't know what kind of treasure that stone turtle shell was. Even the remnant energy from the two treasures couldn't break it. But one thing was certain, the stone turtle shell was definitely not the old turtle's shell. This was because the old turtle's shell was still intact on his body. The old turtle clenched his teeth and endured. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. If not for the corpse general avatar behind him that was continuously channeling Yuan Qi into his body, he would have already collapsed. He was waiting for the opportunity to strike. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.